Chapter 6073. Huang Futing naturally understood that this was the most critical moment, so he kept a close eye on the Holy Light Assembly. The madam had taken such a huge risk for the sake of the Dark Sacred Assembly. No matter what, they must not let anything happen to the madam. Time passed by minute, but it was extremely unbearable for them. This was because they did not know what kind of decision President Liu would make. This was a gamble to begin with. After a long time, when the white figure appeared in front of the door of the Holy Assembly, Di Beichen's body that had been tense all this time relaxed. Huang Futing was just about to speak when he realized that his young master had disappeared. He hurriedly approached the window and realized that his young master had directly jumped down and appeared next to the madam. He immediately smiled and shook his head. His young master had always placed the madam at the top of his heart. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked out of the Holy Light Assembly. She thought that Beichen must be worried after being delayed here for so many days. She could not continue to stay here. She had to hurry back. Just as she was deep in thought, a white figure descended from the sky and appeared next to her in the blink of an eye. There was a moment of surprise on her beautiful and refined little face. After sensing the familiar and reassuring aura, a bright and beautiful smile bloomed on her peerless face. Many people on the street had noticed this scene. The young lady in white and the young man in white were standing together. The scene was pleasing to the eye and magnificent. When the crowd recognized the two of them, the amazement in their hearts deepened. Isn't that the Holy Maiden and young Master Di? That's right, it's them. The rumors are true. The relationship between the two of them is really enviable. As Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's reputation grew, their relationship became a much-told story. Many young men and women hoped that they could have such an unswerving love. Beichen, what are you doing here? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled as she looked at the stunningly handsome face. Even the sunlight was not as dazzling as him. Di Beichen held her little hand. I missed you. These three simple words touched Bailey Hongzhuang's heart inexplicably. How could she not know that Di Beichen was the one she was most worried about when she left? I haven't been back for so long. Beichen must be worried, so he came over. Don't worry. I'm fine. Bailey Hongzhuang opened her hand and interlocked her fingers with Di Beichen's. She felt at ease when she was with him. When she was alone, she had always been fearless. Only when she was with Beichen could she not think about anything and truly relax. Let's go home. Di Beichen didn't ask anything. He just gently held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and left the Holy Assembly. Go home. It was a very heartwarming word. Although nothing dangerous had happened in the past few days, she had to admit that she was really tired. She hadn't rested for 7 days. In addition, she was careful just now. Now that she was relaxed, she felt that her breathing had become smooth. After seeing the scene downstairs, Huang Futing didn't jump down immediately. Madam hadn't had it easy these days. He didn't want to be an eyesore. Therefore, he slowly walked down from upstairs. When he appeared in front of Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang, the timing was just right. Let's go. We're going back, Di Beichen said. Chapter 6074. Huang Futing's face was full of smiles. Isn't that so? Young master is worried about madam's safety. Since you entered the Holy Light Assembly, we have been guarding here. Fortunately, madam has finally come out today. Otherwise, I'm worried that young master would directly kill his way in. He finally understood that young master could be indifferent to everything, but when it came to madam, he really took it to heart. Since the day I entered, Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned and looked at Di Beichen with some surprise. She thought that Beichen came because she had been delayed here for a few days, but now it seemed that Beichen had been here since the day she set off. In that case, she had said so much to Beichen before, but Beichen did not change his mind at all. Under Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze, Di Beichen pretended not to hear and said to himself, We've been out for a few days. It's time for us to go back. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but laugh, but her heart felt exceptionally warm. She had always understood that Beichen cared about her very much. From the first time they met until now, as long as it was about her, Beichen had never neglected it. When searching for her origins, Beichen was more worried than her. When she came to the upper realm, Beichen was worried that she would be bullied. In fact, many times she understood that Beichen was not a person who would say everything, but it could be seen from the things he did. Just as she did not have to worry about the elders not liking her after she went to the D family, she did not have to worry about her status after knowing about Xiao Soa's marriage. This was because she had enough trust in Beichen. Huang Futing also smiled faintly and did not say anything. Usually, when he was dealing with other matters, he did not see young master like this. Come to think of it, he would only act like this in front of Madam. Along the way, Di Beichen didn't take the initiative to mention President Lu's reaction. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that Hong Zhuang didn't want to affect the Holy Assembly, they wouldn't have to come here at all. President Lu's position was completely different from theirs, so the possibility of him agreeing was close to zero. Bailey Hongzhuang also walked quietly, her mind still thinking about the conversation she had in the house. After a while, Bailey Hongzhuang took the initiative to say, "I've already talked to Chairman Lu." "Okay," Di Beichen replied. "Aren't you curious about the answer?" Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and looked at Di Beichen. Her bright eyes were filled with curiosity. Di Beichen raised their interlocked hands and chuckled. "I can roughly guess. At least President Lu is a good person. Otherwise, it wouldn't be you who walked out, but me who went in and snatched you out." "Uft." Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle and nodded. "You're right. President Lu is actually very good." After knowing my decision, although he was shocked, he didn't get angry because of it. For this reason, he specially reminded me of the risks I would have to face. He wanted to persuade me, but after seeing that I was unmoved, he didn't say anything more. "Madam, what is President Lu's attitude?" Huang Futing frowned. It seemed that after talking for a long time, there was still no result. "He neither supports nor opposes it," Di Beichen said. Chapter 60-75. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Huang Futing could not help but sigh. However, he also understood that with President Lu's status, it was already good enough that he did not directly object. According to his understanding of the Holy Assembly, ordinary people would not accept this at all. Di Beichen was not worried. In fact, he understood that Bailey Hongzhuang did this for his own peace of mind, and also to give an explanation to the Holy Assembly. From the beginning to the end, she did not have any hope. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly. In fact, President Lu's attitude was already a pleasant surprise for her. This was because Chairman Lu didn't refute it directly. On the contrary, Chairman Lu was well aware of the difficult situation that dark attribute cultivators had been in all these years. Even he had to admit that this situation was unfair to dark attribute cultivators. She clearly felt that President Lu was a little touched when she mentioned this point. She was very glad that they were not the only ones who thought of all this. Since President Lu had thought of this point, there must be others who had thought of it too. Even if the vast majority of people were still very resistant to the darkness attribute, she was very clear about this world. When some influential people agreed, the voices of opposition would quickly decrease. This was because the right to speak had always been in the hands of a small number of people. As long as the identity of darkness attribute cultivators was confirmed, even if it would take a long time for everyone to eliminate the views of rejection, it was not a big deal. The problem of time would eventually be solved with time. Di Beichen, I think the situation may not be as bad as we think. Suddenly, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice sounded, and a faint smile appeared on her beautiful face. Hearing this, Di Beichen and Huang Futing could not help but look at her. After seeing the slightly relaxed smile on the latter's face, their mood inexplicably improved. During this period of time, because the dark sacred assembly was about to be established, no one said anything on the surface, but everyone was under a lot of pressure. A storm was coming. Under the seemingly calm surface, everyone could not help but worry. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's smile was so healing that it made them forget their worries. Di Beichen looked deeply at Bailey Hongzhuang and said, "My wife's words are like gold." Bailey Hongzhuang was full of smiles, but her mind was thinking about President Lu's hesitant expression. She understood that what she had said had shaken President Lu. Perhaps what she had said now was useless, but she hoped that when that day came, President Lu would be willing to help. because no one could guarantee that their descendants would not be of the darkness attribute. If all the things that they hated now happened to their own descendants, would they still have such hatred in their hearts? Zhao Jian walked alone on the empty road. He looked, his soulless and dispirited and haggard look. Overnight he was deserted. This feeling was a huge blow to anyone. However, facing his brother's departure, he could not say he was wrong. He constantly asked himself in his heart, but when he thought of Huang Futing, all his questions turned into annoyance and hatred. He hated Huang Futing. He felt that Huang Futing had ruined everything. If it were not for Huang Futing, he would not have ended up like this. Chapter 60-76. That damned Huang Futing. Zhao Jian cursed. What do you mean I've changed? It's all just an excuse. His dark eyes were filled with anger. He was sure that these people were just using this excuse to leave him, so that they could hug Huang Futing's thigh. They just couldn't find a reason to push all the blame onto him. He would be a fool if he really believed it. I have to pull myself together. I can't let Huang Futing see me as a joke. Zhao Jian's gaze gradually became firm. He had been muddle-headed for the past few days and couldn't figure it out. At this moment, he finally figured it out. Why did he have to push all the blame onto him? It must be because everyone had changed their minds from the moment they saw the dark sacred assembly. He was the one who was the most rude to Di Beichen. The others didn't say anything. As long as he wasn't around, Di Beichen might accept others. He had been thinking for everyone for such a long time, but no one treated him as a brother. What dark sacred assembly? Di Beichen had already made up his mind to not accept him. What did the establishment of the dark sacred assembly have to do with him? The next moment, Zhao Jian suddenly changed his direction and walked towards the Piercing Wind City. Piercing Wind City Xiao family. Ever since the negotiation with Di Yujue was successful, Xiao Yanlong had stayed in the family and tried his best to nurture the young cultivators in the family. The most outstanding batch had already fallen in this trial. They only had a year's time. Although it was too short, they could only do their best. The Di family's land of inheritance was not simple. The three big families had opened it together, and after entering, it would definitely be a trial. If the family's disciples were too weak, they would just have to hand over the items. The Di family's strength was getting stronger and stronger, causing him to feel more and more tired. Who would have thought that Xiao Sou would be pregnant at this time? He had no choice. As the child's grandfather, he couldn't be so cruel. Xiao Sou had been staying in her house. To outsiders, she said that she was in seclusion, but in reality, she was taking care of her baby. Jun Hongcheng was also very concerned about his only grandson. From time to time, he would send people to deliver some supplements. The child in Xiao Sou's belly was his greatest hope. On this day, Xiao Yanlong heard an unbelievable piece of news. So he immediately found Jun Hongcheng and brought him over. Looking at the skinny and dark-skinned man in front of them, the faces of the two patriarchs were filled with shock. Is what you said true? Di Beichen is establishing the Dark Sanctum? That's right. Even the headquarters of the Dark Sacred Assembly has been built. It's near Emperor Cloud City, the man replied. How is this possible? Xiao Yanlong frowned. His eyes were filled with thoughts. This news was too sudden and too unbelievable. The Di family is in the limelight right now. As long as we continue to develop with this momentum, perhaps our family's status will rise again and become a transcendent aristocratic family. At this time, aren't they shooting themselves in the foot by doing such a thing? Jun Hongcheng nodded slightly and said, I think this news is most likely false. Di Beichen wouldn't make such a crazy decision, and Di Yujue wouldn't agree. Establishing the Dark Sacred Assembly in the upper realm was something that only a madman would do. Obviously, in their eyes, Di Yujue and Di Beichen were not madmen. Chapter 60-77. Zhao Jian had spent a tremendous amount of effort to meet the two family heads. With his status, meeting the family heads was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Now that he had finally managed to meet them, the two family heads did not believe him at all. He could not help but feel anxious. Seeing Zhao Jian's anxious look, Jun Hongcheng slowly narrowed his eyes. His gaze was vigilant and cold. You're of the darkness attribute as well. Establishing the dark sanctuary will only bring you benefits and no harm. You've suddenly come to tell us this at a time like this. Could it be that Di Baichen has come up with some new scheme to trick us? After falling into the hands of the Di family time and time again, they had become more careful in their dealings. This 1 year was a period of stability that they had obtained with great difficulty. Nothing was more important than the child in Xiao Soa's womb. However, they also understood that the Di family must be very dissatisfied with this 1 year. If it had not been for the importance of the land of heritage, they would not have agreed to it. Now that this news had suddenly spread, perhaps the Di family was deliberately baiting them, so that they could take the opportunity to attack them again. Zhao Jian hurriedly waved his hand. Family heads, I have a deep grudge with Di Baichen's subordinate Huang Futing. To be honest, I didn't come to inform you of this news out of good intentions. I just didn't want to see Huang Futing getting too complacent. That's why I wanted to spread this news. The scene before him had clearly exceeded Zhao Jian's expectations. He had thought that the two family heads would be very happy after hearing this news, and that he would be treated well here. He never thought that the two family heads would not believe him at all. They even thought that he was a spy. In fact, ever since Zhao Jian had awakened the darkness attribute, he had always been with people of the same attribute. He did not have enough experience in dealing with matters. Even if he had a good plan, it was not enough in front of the two old foxes. Jun Hongcheng and Xiao Yanlong looked at each other. Both of them raised their eyebrows slightly. Clearly, they would not believe Zhao Jian's words so easily. This person's sudden appearance was already very suspicious. Now that the news was so unreliable, they were almost certain that it was all fake. Men, take him away. Xiao Yanlong furrowed his brows. He did not want to waste time on such a groundless matter. If word got out, wouldn't he become a joke? Master Xiao, I'm telling the truth. Zhao Jian was completely dumbfounded. He never thought that this would be the outcome. However, Xiao Yanlong did not care about him at all. When he sent someone to take him away, he even gave the other person a look. Regardless of whether the news was true or not, this fellow could not be allowed to live. Xiao family head, Jun family head, please let me go. Neither Xiao Yanlong nor Jun Hongqing took the initiative to speak. They just sat there quietly, countless thoughts swirling in their minds. Chapter 6078. I've also heard about this news. Xiao Yanlong nodded slightly. In fact, he had only heard a few words about this news. Even some of his family's disciples weren't sure about it. However, since Jun Hongqing had also heard about this, it proved that it wasn't groundless. Although this guy doesn't seem to be a good person, we can still go and inquire about this news. What do you think? Jun Hongqing raised his eyes and looked at Xiao Yanlong. His deep eyes were full of dignified expression. Currently, both their families were in a very difficult situation. The Di family and the Lin family were eyeing them covetously. Once the secret land of inheritance opened, the Di family would be greatly improved. At that time, the situation of their two families could be imagined. Therefore, as long as there was a glimmer of hope to completely overthrow the Di family, they couldn't give up. If the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly was true, it would inevitably cause a devastating blow to Di Baichen, and even the Di family. Xiao Yanlong frowned. This news is most likely false. Maybe Di Baichen is waiting for us in the Emperor Cloud City. If we go, won't we fall into a trap? He still didn't believe that Di Baichen would do such a bold thing. No matter who heard this news, they would think it was false. Just send 2 people to see if there is such a building or not. Don't worry too much. Jun Hongqing waved his hand. He only felt that after experiencing these things, Xiao Yanlong's mind was getting smaller and smaller. He was actually afraid of the Di family to this extent. All right. The Xiao family had already established a transmission array near the Emperor Cloud City, so it was very fast to send people to inquire about it. When the two heard that there was really a black building near the Emperor Cloud City, their expressions changed, and their eyes flashed with a thick shock. It's really there? Xiao Yanlong couldn't help but raise his voice. His eyes widened, revealing the shock in his heart. Reporting to Lord, we have indeed discovered a black building not far from here. This building is extremely grand and majestic, and it is completely black. It does indeed look like the headquarters of the Dark Sacred Assembly. We guarded the area for a while and saw cultivators going in and out. However, we were afraid of being discovered, so we didn't dare to test them. So, we didn't know what kind of attribute they had. I got it. You can leave now. Yes. After his subordinate left, Xiao Yanlong looked at Jun Hongqing. Because this matter had always been of concern to them, Jun Hongqing had also stayed in the Xiao family these few days to wait for news. Since this black building really exists, could it be that what Zhao Jian said was true? If I had known earlier, I would have kept him alive. Jun Hongqing's eyes darkened. It's fine if he's dead, but this person's motives aren't pure. If he's a spy, it'll be a disaster. Let's consider this matter carefully. Xiao Yanlong nodded. If this is true, then Di Beichen is really courting death. Perhaps he's been in the limelight too much recently, so he thinks that he can succeed in everything he does. It's human nature to be arrogant. Di Beichen's journey has been too smooth. Jun Hongqing narrowed his eyes. Regarding Di Beichen's rise, his mood was very complicated. He couldn't understand why it was like this. Ling Sun had always been very outstanding in his heart, but when he was with Di Beichen, he was always suppressed. Chapter 60-79. If that's the case, then Di Beichen is really courting death. Xiao Yanlong's lips curved into a cold smile. I wonder if Di Yujue knows about this? This matter happened near Diyan City. It's hard to say if Di Yujue knows about it. Jun Hongqing frowned. He really couldn't judge whether this matter was done by Di Beichen alone, or with the support of the Di family. Logically speaking, it was impossible for Di Yujue to not know about this matter, since it happened in Diyan City. But if Di Yujue knew and still allowed Di Beichen to do this, then he was completely crazy. I have been dealing with Di Yujue for so many years. Although he has always been swift and decisive in doing things, and doesn't lack courage, I have never seen him do such a crazy thing. Xiao Yanlong shook his head. For the head of the family, the most important thing was the interests of the family. They would never agree to anything that would shake the foundation of the family. Even if Di Yujue owed Di Beichen and doted on him, it was impossible for him to do such a thing that would harm the interests of the family. We can consider this matter at length. If all of this is confirmed to be true, then perhaps God is helping us. Jun Hongqing's eyes gradually brightened. Now that they had been suppressed by the Di family, they felt that they had no power to fight back. Every day, he worried about what the Jun family's situation would be like when the one-year deadline was up. If Di Beichen really did such an incredible thing, then it would be the best opportunity for them to attack the Di family. Even if they couldn't take the opportunity to completely destroy the Di family, as long as they severely damaged the Di family, they could make the Di family disappear from the world completely. As long as there was an opportunity, it would be enough. Xiao Yanlong's face also showed a smile. There is no way out, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I thought that this was already a dead end, but I didn't expect that there would be a way out. Send people to find out about this matter. We will spread this news. I believe that after hearing this news, the major forces will be very angry. When the time comes, they will question Di Beichen one after another. If Di Beichen still insists on establishing the Dark Guild, Di Beichen will definitely be attacked. The Di family can't sit by and do nothing when something happens to their young master, so the Di family will inevitably become the target of public. If Di Beichen chooses to give up under such circumstances, then his reputation will be greatly affected. His reputation, and the Di family will no longer be glorious. No matter what the result was, there were only benefits and no harm to them. On this day, a piece of news quickly spread throughout the upper realm. Was heard. The Di families the young will establish the Sacred Dark Guild? Really? Di's really is? It's absolutely true. Many people already know about this news. Because he is of the dark attribute, he doesn't want everyone to deny it. So he came up with the idea of establishing the Sacred Dark Guild. The dark attribute has always been looked down upon by the major forces. Young Master Di actually dares to do this. Isn't he courting death? Who knows? Maybe he thinks that he is amazing and can succeed in anything. So he dares to challenge everyone's bottom line. Restaurants, tea houses, streets, and alleys, this shocking news was spread everywhere. Chapter 60-80. Only the D family knew that D Bachin was going to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly. Even the Lin family was not aware of it. Therefore, when Lin Taxing and the others heard the news, they thought it was a rumor. However, they still went to the D family as soon as possible. Even if it was just a rumor, they had to refute it. Otherwise, if this rumor spread, it would be extremely detrimental to the entire D family. Murong Jing, Jiang Wenyan, and Chen Feng were also shocked when they heard the news. Murong Jing and Jiang Wenyan immediately felt that this must be a new method that the Xiao family and the Jun family came up with to deal with D Bachin. Although they knew that the Jun family and the Xiao family would not stop, such a method was still beyond their expectations. To be honest, this rumor was even richer than their imagination. Only Chen Feng was stunned for a while after hearing the news. His gaze gradually became complicated. He remembered how familiar D Bachin and Huang Futing were. If his judgment was correct, Huang Futing's group should all be of the dark attribute. Even if D Bachin and the others hid it when they communicated, he could still see that Huang Futing and the others respected D Bachin very much. It could even be said that they were obedient to him. He was also very clear about Huang Futing's identity. It was impossible for such a person to become D Bachin's subordinate without any reason. Moreover, when he was at the Radiant Temple, he clearly did not notice anyone in Huang Futing's group. It was impossible for such a dazzling Radiant Temple to not notice. Therefore, there was only one explanation for this matter, and that was that they had gone to the Dark Temple. Why did so many dark attribute cultivators respect D Bachin? He did not think much about it at first. However, after hearing the news, he suddenly understood everything. So this was the real reason. D Family Conference Hall. D Yujue stood at the front of the conference hall. His handsome face was solemn. Bachin, now that the news has spread, are you mentally prepared? Father, actually, I've already sent the invitations to the various large guilds' headquarters a few days ago. However, the meeting will take place in 3 days. D Bachin's expression was calm. His unparalleled face revealed his unswerving determination. A few days ago, he had already decided to announce this news to the world. However, before that, he had sent invitations to the various large guilds. Establishing the Dark Sanctum was a matter that belonged to guilds. As long as the guild leaders of the various large guilds were willing to acknowledge the existence of the Dark Sacred Assembly, everything would be complete. As for other people's thoughts, they could only rely on time to gradually change. I've already found the source of the news. It's the work of the Xiao and Jun families. D Yujue's eyes were hazy. He knew that these two families were not easy to deal with. At this time, they would definitely ruthlessly trample on him. D Linxian sighed faintly. This matter is truly too risky. Once it fails, the consequences would be unimaginable. He didn't expect his son and grandson to come up with such a terrible plan. But since it had come to this, all he could do was support them. His grandson was of the dark attribute. If the dark attribute could really make a name for itself, it would be a good thing. Grandfather, I'm very sorry. When D Bachin looked at D Linxian, there was an additional trace of apology and guilt in his eyes. Speaking of which, he had stubbornly dragged the entire family down with him. Chapter 60-81. D Bachin was touched by D Linxuan's benevolence. Even Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but feel touched. In the aristocratic families, it had always been the cultivators who sacrificed themselves for the family. How many families would stake everything on a single throw, just because of an individual's thoughts? D Bachin and his father didn't tell their grandfather about this matter. On one hand, they were worried that their grandfather would be greatly affected. On the other hand, they were worried that their grandfather would object. However, they didn't expect their grandfather to be so open-minded. They thought that their grandfather might be furious after finding out about this matter. He might object or even question them for not considering the family's safety. However, they didn't expect their grandfather to support them unconditionally. Grandfather. Father. D Bachin and D Yujue looked at D Linxian in surprise. Their emotions were complicated. D Linxian smiled faintly. You and your father made a decision without telling me. Do you really think that I don't know anything? Beichen is the destined young master of our family. No matter if this matter succeeds or not. No matter what the family will become in the end. Since it's decided, then go ahead and do it. Some initiatives may seem crazy to many people, but once it succeeds, the change will be very shocking. I feel that Beichen has always had this kind of courage. This might not be a bad thing. Once it succeeds, Beichen will be the president of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Isn't that great? Di Linxian smiled. He had lived to this age and understood many things. However, I still sent people to transfer the younger generation. No matter what, the Di family should keep some seedlings. Hearing Di Linxuan's words, Di Beichen's eyes turned sour. Grandfather, thank you. What's there to thank for? We're a family. Di Linxian smiled. Although the family's position has been stable all these years, there hasn't been much change. The reason why we're in the limelight now is because of you and Hong Zhuang. I feel that this crazy matter might actually succeed. Everyone couldn't help but smile. Once they succeeded, the Di family would have another force, the Dark Sacred Assembly. In the future, their position would truly be unshakable. If they wanted to succeed, they would have to bear the corresponding risks. They had long understood this. Similarly, after the news of Di Beichen wanting to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly spread out, the dark attribute cultivators scattered all over the world seemed to have seen a ray of light. Dark Sanctum, this was a name they didn't even dare to think about, but it was also the thing they looked forward to the most in their dreams. Di Beichen's name was known to almost everyone who practiced the dark attribute, because he was the only young master of the dark attribute family. Not only that, but he also married the Saint of Light. All of this was no different from a legend in their eyes. Everyone would smile when they talked about him, because that was their beautiful vision. However, they had never thought that Di Beichen would actually want to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly. After a brief moment of shock, almost everyone unanimously made the decision to go to the Emperor Cloud City. They were going to the Dark Sanctum. This was because they were all dark attribute cultivators. They understood that after this matter spread out, they would have to face a storm. They also understood that Di Beichen's actions were to give them a protective umbrella. It was precisely because of this that they wanted to protect Di Beichen. Chapter 6082. Cultivators from all over the upper realm were rushing to Emperor Cloud City. They were not the only ones. Other onlookers were also gathering in Emperor Cloud City. Now there was a long line on the teleportation array to Emperor Cloud City. We have to be prepared. Now that the news has spread, there must be a lot of cultivators coming. When the time comes, all of us will be responsible for welcoming them. Huang Futing instructed everyone. Before the young master left, he had already instructed them. All dark attribute cultivators were members of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Their original intention in establishing the Dark Sacred Assembly was to allow dark attribute cultivators to no longer be excluded and to have a way to cultivate. Brother Huangfu, don't worry. We are all ready. Everyone spoke one after another, their eyes full of hope. Over the years, they had tried their best to gather dark attribute cultivators together to form a team. However, because dark attribute cultivators could not be seen, everything could only be done in secret. Therefore, the results were not very good. Many cultivators did not know of their existence at all, and many of these cultivators were in a more difficult situation than them. The establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly was undoubtedly a good opportunity for everyone to gather together. Through this opportunity, they could meet more cultivators of the same attribute. They were a team. Even if they might face great resistance, their will was as strong as an impregnable fortress. They would never waver. Huang Futing's gaze swept across everyone. After seeing the determination on everyone's faces, he could not help but feel gratified. The young master had already withstood a lot of pressure for them. They could not let the young master worry about these things anymore. When Lin Taxing and the others arrived and found out that the news was not a mistake, but true, their feelings were extremely complicated. None of them thought that Beichen would do such a crazy thing. Now that everything had been publicized, it was too late for them to organize an organization. All the major forces had already known, and now there was no objection to the explanation. Instead of that, it was better to carry out this matter to the end. Lin Wenlan looked at everyone in front of him, and could not help but shake his head and sigh. Too impulsive. Why didn't you discuss such a big matter with us? Recently, he had been cultivating in seclusion. When he suddenly heard the news, he did not care about anything else, and rushed over immediately. Grandfather, this was my idea. Di Baichen couldn't help but say when he saw Lin Wenlan's anger directed at Di Yujue. What happened back then made his grandfather very dissatisfied with his father. Now that things had finally eased a little, it was inevitable that his grandfather would be angry. However, he couldn't let his father take the blame anymore. To tell you the truth, I actually obtained the Dark Saint's inheritance back then. This was the last wish that my master entrusted to me. So, no matter what, I have to complete it. Di Baichen's expression was serious and solemn, as he bowed deeply to Lin Wenlan. His handsome face was somewhat apologetic, but more than that, it was firm and resolute. This was originally just my problem, but it implicated everyone. I'm very sorry. Lin Wenlan, who was originally very dissatisfied with this matter, fell silent after hearing Di Baichen's words. He didn't know that there was such a matter here. Chapter 6083. After hearing Di Baichen's original intention, Lin Wenlan's anger dissipated a little. As the master of an aristocratic family, he had some understanding of the situation of the dark attribute cultivators. So far, there was no one more outstanding than Di Baichen among the dark attribute cultivators in the upper realm. When he first found out that Baichen had the dark attribute, he had a complicated feeling. He felt that the child had a tough life. Back then, he left his family not long after he was born. When he finally came back, he awakened the dark attribute. However, what happened later was beyond his expectations. From his point of view, it was extremely difficult for a dark attribute cultivator to increase their cultivation. However, it seemed like the restriction did not exist for Di Baichen. After such a long time, Di Baichen's cultivation did not fall behind at all. On the contrary, it became more and more outstanding. Now that he connected the dots, everything made sense. So Baichen has inherited the dark attribute. No wonder it's like this. Lin Wenlan understood. It was obvious that the inheritance was extraordinary. However, Baichen's master's last wish was too difficult to fulfill. Now that things have come to this, it's useless to talk about the reason. Di Linxian said slowly. Since it's Baichen's master's last wish, it's Baichen's responsibility to fulfill it. Actually, if you think about it carefully, it might seem crazy, but it's not impossible. It's been a long time since the incident back then. The dark attribute powerhouses have almost disappeared. They've been suppressed all year round, and it's very unfair to the younger generation. Although there will be a lot of resistance, as long as we can convince the leaders of the major guilds, there's still a chance of success. Lin Wenlan fell silent after hearing Di Linxian's words. Almost everyone felt that this was a crazy decision the moment they heard the news. However, as long as they thought about it carefully, they would realize that there was still a chance of success. However, the resistance was still very strong. Baichen, are you confident? Lin Wenlan, who had been silent all this while, suddenly asked. Di Baichen looked at Lin Wenlan's serious face and nodded. I believe it will succeed. Since that's the case, I'll take this gamble with you. Di Baichen was slightly startled. Lin Wenlan laughed and said, even old man Di has the courage. Do you think I don't dare? Since it's a responsibility, then don't worry so much. Just do it bravely. Lin Wenlan patted Di Baichen's shoulder with a gratified smile on her face. Nowadays, many cultivators had completely forgotten their master's instructions. They didn't even take a living master seriously, let alone a dead master. Under such circumstances, he increasingly felt that Di Baichen's qualities were extremely valuable. Perhaps it was because Di Baichen was such a person that he was able to obtain the inheritance of darkness. All these years, almost all the dark attribute cultivators had been hoping to obtain the inheritance of darkness. Without the inheritance, they didn't even have the method to cultivate the power of darkness. After connecting all the dots, He felt that Di Baichen was very likely to be the destined person. Perhaps all the impossible would be completed by him. Chapter 6084. Di Baichen's eyes swept over the crowd one by one. The more everyone supported him, the more he felt the responsibility on his shoulders. Everyone in front of him was the person he cared about the most. The establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly could only succeed, not fail. Because he couldn't let the people he cared about lose what they cared about. He had worked so hard to cultivate, until now to protect the people he cared about. If everyone fell to the bottom with him, that would be the most unacceptable thing. I will work hard to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly, and make it the support of the Di family and the Lin family. His incomparably handsome face was filled with unswerving determination, and his bottomless black eyes were filled with sincerity and conviction. His every word and sentence was so serious that it was like an oath that made people's hearts tremble. Looking at Di Baichen like this, the elders' faces showed relief. Compared to the peaceful atmosphere in the hall, the cultivators of the Di family and the Lin family were restless. In their opinion, everything was developing in a good direction. They didn't understand why the young master would do such a dangerous thing. It is said that many people have now gathered in the Emperor Cloud City. For so many years, the Emperor Cloud City has never been so lively. I feel that everyone's attention is now on our family. When the time comes, if all the major forces blame us, what should we do? Sigh. I really didn't expect the young master to do such an irrational thing. It is said that the family master has already transferred some cultivators away. Don't be so pessimistic, okay? The young master naturally has his reasons for doing this. Maybe he will succeed. Don't be naive. After this incident, the disciples of the Di family had long lost the mood to cultivate. Even the cultivators who were in seclusion were directly blown out by the news. Everyone was talking about this matter, but everyone's mood was very complicated. In the past, they had always been obedient to the young master, but now this matter was really too unsettling. Therefore, the entire Di family was in chaos, and the discussion was full of unconcealable anxiety. Apart from the Di family and the Lin family, there was another place where people were talking about the Holy Light Assembly. Almost as soon as the news spread, the Holy Light Assembly was shaken. Lu Hongwei couldn't help but shake his head when he heard the news. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang had already told him about it, he was still shocked when he heard the news. President, have you heard the news that Di Baichen wants to establish the Dark Sanctum? The deacons of the Radiant Sacred Assembly immediately rushed up and couldn't hold back their doubts. Looking at the anxious faces in front of him, Lu Hongwei nodded slightly. I've already heard. How could the Saintess allow Di Baichen to do such a thing? Everyone was depressed. Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang were known for their good relationship. A few days ago, someone had seen Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang together. Just based on this point, they were sure that Bailey Hongzhuang definitely knew about it. At this time, a deacon seemed to have thought of something and suddenly said, President, the Saintess suddenly came to the guild a few days ago. Could it be for this matter? As soon as this was said, everyone's eyes turned to Lu Hongwei. Chapter 6085. That's right. The Saintess had already told me about this when she came to the Sacred Assembly. Lu Hongwei did not deny it. Since things had come to this point, everyone should know the truth. President, since the Saintess had already told you about this, why didn't you stop her? Everyone was puzzled. They had never thought that the Saintess would come here just to tell the President about this. However, this did lessen the resentment in their hearts a little. At least, the fact that the Saintess was willing to tell him about this in advance proved that she was still responsible. I couldn't stop her. Lu Hongwei shook his head and sighed. I've already tried to persuade her before, but it didn't work. Then what should we do now? The Saintess represents the image of our sacred assembly. Now that she's with young Master Di, everyone will think that we're involved in this matter. All the members will be dissatisfied with this. Looking at everyone's anxious expressions, Lu Hongwei's expression was very calm. Then what do you want to do? No matter what, we have to get the Saintess out of this matter. Only then will our sacred assembly not be affected. The leader of the deacons said seriously. The Light Sacred Assembly had always been enemies with dark attribute cultivators. Since hundreds of years ago, they were the organization that targeted dark attribute cultivators the most. However, the Saintess was now going to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly with Di Baichen. What kind of scandal was this? Lu Hongwei waved his hand. This won't work. If it did, I would have stopped her before. There's one thing I want you to be clear about. The Saintess doesn't care about this identity. She already told me this when she came to find me. President, what do you mean? Everyone was stunned. Even though they had roughly guessed it, they still found it hard to believe. If everyone doesn't agree, she'll resign from the position of the Saintess. Silence. There was a deathly silence. Everyone who was clamoring that the Saintess was going overboard immediately shut their mouths. Because this way, they would not even have a trump card to threaten the Saintess. If Bailey Hongzhuang cared about this position, they could say that she was no longer the Saintess if she was still so stubborn. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not care about all this at all. The entire Light Sacred Assembly was not important to her. Then they really could not do anything. Could it be that the Saintess doesn't care about all this? Everyone felt incredulous. Although the title of Saint of Light was just a title, it actually had a lot of advantages. At the very least, there were very few people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him in terms of status. This was a position that many people yearned for even in their dreams. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't seem to care at all. Facing the man's question, Lu Hongwei rudely shattered his fantasy. She doesn't care. From the beginning to the end, she didn't show that she cared. After understanding Bailey Hongzhuang, he realized that she did not care about fame and fortune. These things that the world pursued had never been important to her. Not only that, she did not expect the position of Saintess to bring her anything. On the contrary, she only felt that she should do something for the Sacred Assembly. It was this kind of mentality that made him, as the president, feel ashamed. Chapter 6086. President, so we can't do anything now? Someone asked, unwilling to give up. We can. Lu Hongwei spread his hands. As long as we choose not to have the saint. Everyone looked at each other. As deacons, they knew how difficult it was for the Sacred Assembly to find the saint over the years. When they first found out that Xiao Soa's talent was extremely close to the requirements, everyone was happy. However, the entire guild had put in a lot of effort to make up for that small gap. The effort they had put in was not something that outsiders could understand. It was only when Bailey Hongzhuang appeared that they realized that everything was in vain. It was because they had made the wrong choice. Although the saint rarely came to the Sacred Assembly, everyone knew that the saint was not doing nothing. On the contrary, the saint had been working hard to contribute to the Sacred Assembly. Almost every once in a while, the saint would write a letter about her understanding of the light attribute and send it back. Even though the Sacred Assembly had been passed down for so many years, everyone was still learning about the attribute power. Originally, everyone thought that the saint had just come to the upper realm and had only been in contact with the light attribute for a short time. Even if she had an unattainable talent in this area, it would be very difficult for her to achieve this. It was not until the saint mentioned this that they realized that the saint's understanding in this area was far beyond their imagination. Even some of the things that they thought were right were wrong after being reminded by the saintess. If Bailey Hongzhuang knew about everyone's guesses, she would definitely find it very interesting. She had the inheritance of the saint and knew the cultivation direction of the light attribute. Even if there were some problems that she did not understand when using it, after learning from Granny Hua, she gradually gained a lot of understanding. She had sent these discoveries back to the Sacred Assembly. She hoped that the Sacred Assembly would become better, and the entire upper realm would become stronger. However, she did not know that the news she sent back would cause such a big commotion in the Sacred Assembly. President, we finally found the saint. We can't let her leave just like that. Now that the situation has become like this, what should we do? Are we supposed to agree to this? If we agree to this, I'm afraid that everyone will look at us. Everyone looked at each other. This matter put them in a dilemma. Lu Hongwei spread out his hands. In fact, he had been thinking about this problem for the past few days. No matter how he thought about it, He couldn't think of a good solution. The Holy Light Assembly could not afford to lose the Holy Maiden of Light, but they could not sit by and do nothing about the establishment of the Dark Assembly. After being the president for so many years, this was the first time he had encountered such a troublesome problem. Everyone, don't be anxious. Let's see what the other guilds think first. Lu Hongwei sighed. He felt that he needed to make a trip to Emperor Cloud City. As early as a few days ago, he had received an invitation from Di Bei-chun, and the presidents of other guilds had also received it. He believed that the guild leaders of the various large guilds were feeling very conflicted. If everyone sat down and had a good discussion, they might be able to come up with a solution. Hearing this, everyone nodded. Under such circumstances, they could only wait for now. Chapter 6087. Dark Sacred Assembly Headquarters. Di Bei-chun and Bailey Hongzhuang had been waiting for the arrival of the leaders of the various guilds since early in the morning. The invitation letter that they handed out said that they were meeting today. They originally wanted to wait until everyone arrived before talking about this matter properly, but they didn't expect the news to leak out faster than them. In the blink of an eye, the news had already spread out. They were very clear that this was most likely Zhao Jian's doing. The Jun and Xiao families must have added fuel to the fire and thought of ways to spread this news, which was why the news spread so quickly. They didn't care about this. Anyway, this scene was destined to come. It was just a matter of time. Silence. There were clearly many people gathered in the headquarters of the Dark Sacred Assembly, but everyone couldn't help but maintain silence, making the entire guild seem abnormally quiet. As the sky became brighter, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze fell on the entrance of the Sacred Assembly from time to time, looking forward to the arrival of the various leaders. She understood that when the various leaders arrived, they would inevitably have fierce words, but they also hoped that they could persuade them with their own strength. Time passed by minute, and everyone in the Sacred Assembly waited silently. However, as the sky gradually changed, everyone's hearts gradually sank. Master! It's already afternoon, but they still haven't appeared, could it be? Xiao He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a complicated expression and asked tentatively. For such a long time, because it knew how serious the situation today was, it didn't break the silence. However, it clearly remembered that the time written on the invitation letter was in the morning. It was already afternoon, but they still hadn't appeared. Did that mean that the various leaders didn't plan to come at all? Bailey Hongzhuang only looked at Xiao He, but didn't answer. Di Bei-chun also sat expressionlessly. His deep and charming eyes didn't seem to have any emotions at this moment. But everyone knew that his feelings must be the most complicated. Everyone in the Sacred Assembly's hearts sank. They originally thought that they could try to persuade the various leaders after they arrived. As long as they succeeded, then everything would turn around. However, the various leaders of the Sacred Assembly weren't even willing to come, which also proved their inner thoughts. Rejection. No room for discussion. That one action had already made everything clear. At the same time, this decision also cut off all their escape routes. The sky grew darker and darker. When night fell, Bailey Hongzhuang also lowered her eyes. It seemed that the various large guilds were more resolute than they had thought. She put her hand on Di Bei-chun's hand and said with concern, Bei-chun, things will definitely turn for the better. The problems left behind after so many years weren't easy to solve. The attitude of the various large guilds wasn't unexpected. However, disappointment was unavoidable. Di Bei-chun held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and interlocked their fingers. This was the first time Bailey Hongzhuang felt that Di Bei-chun's hand was a little cold. Usually his hand was wide and warm. As long as she felt that temperature, she would feel incomparably at ease. But this time, his hand felt cold to the touch, as if revealing the worry in his heart. She couldn't help but put her other hand on top of his as well, wanting to give him more warmth. She understood Bei-chun. He had always been a very responsible person. No matter how carefree he usually acted, he always thought about all of this in his heart. Chapter 6088. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't open her mouth to ask Di Bei-chun to relax, because she knew very well that it was simply impossible. This was a decision that carried the burden of the entire family. Even if everyone was saying not to worry, and that things would develop in a good direction, everyone's hearts were shrouded in a dark cloud. It was like a taut string. Once it snapped, no one knew what would happen. Noticing Bailey Hongzhuang's worried gaze, Di Beichen's lips gradually curved into a smile. This smile didn't rise, but it broke the deadpan expression on his face, and there was a trace of gentleness in his cold lines. Don't worry about me. Di Beichen reached out and poked Bailey Hongzhuang's worried face. A smile suits you better. Okay. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a slight smile. There are more and more cultivators reporting to the sacred assembly these days. Looking at the smiles on the faces of those dark attribute cultivators, she felt that all of this was worth it. Di Beichen nodded slightly. This might be the only thing worth rejoicing about at the moment. While Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen waited for a day, the guild leaders who had never appeared all appeared at the headquarters of the Light Sacred Assembly. For a long time, the Light Sacred Assembly had been the leader of the 7 major guilds. Usually, whenever there was something to discuss, everyone would gather here. Originally, everyone didn't know what was going on after receiving the invitation, but for the sake of young Master Di and the Light Sacred Lady, they planned to go. However, when this news came out, they couldn't remain calm. The most important thing was that if they went, no one knew what the situation would be like, so they must inform each other before going. President Lu, we can't agree to this matter no matter what. Luo Qinghao, the Wood Attribute Guild leader, said resolutely. The Dark Attribute has always been in existence that we have resisted. If the Dark Sacred Assembly is established, then the future situation will be completely changed. Once the catastrophe happens again, the entire upper realm won't be able to withstand another disaster. Guild leader Luo is right. All these years, those with the dark attribute have been searching for a solution, but we've suppressed them all. Now that the Saint of Light has suddenly stirred up trouble, we are also in a difficult position. Feng Yuxian, the Water Faction's guild master, also spoke up. President Lu, I think you should solve this problem. Then the rest of our matters will be easier. Resistance was their unified attitude, and the only problem that needed to be solved was this. While the presidents were having a heated discussion, the president of the metal attribute, Song Langtian, had not spoken. When he first heard the news, he was extremely shocked. However, when he thought about what Bailey Hongzhuang said when she was treating Zhu Qing, he suddenly understood. So this was what the Holy Maiden wanted. At that time, he didn't understand. He only thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was making an excuse to make them feel at ease. Now he understood that the Holy Maiden really needed help. However, this matter was simply too unexpected. It was such a huge matter that even he found it hard to believe. Such an action was simply challenging all the guilds. But when he thought of Bailey Hongzhuang's kindness to them, he couldn't say anything more. At the very least, if you asked him to take action against Bailey Hongzhuang, he would absolutely not do it. Chapter 6089. The last time he came to the Holy Light Assembly, he learned that President Lu admired Bailey Hongzhuang very much. However, none of them had expected such a thing to happen. Even he felt very hesitant now, let alone President Lu. He believed that President Lu's inner struggle was no less than his. Sure enough, he noticed the helplessness in President Lu's eyes in the blink of an eye. When he looked at Lu Hongwei was also looking at him. Among everyone, the two of them understood each other's thoughts the best. What do you think now? Lu Hongwei asked with a solemn expression. In the current situation, they really had to make a decision first, because everyone was discussing this matter. If they didn't speed up, it would really be too late. Luo Qinghao said without hesitation. This matter is very simple. Destroy the Dark Sacred Assembly. As soon as he said this, everyone's eyes fell on him. Everyone is very clear about the danger of the dark attribute. Ordinary cultivators won't awaken the dark attribute. This dark attribute also represents a person's personality to a certain extent. What happened back then is still vivid in our minds. We can only give everyone an explanation by destroying the Dark Sacred Assembly. Luo Qinghao's expression was serious. and his every word was filled with determination. That's right. The Dark Sacred Assembly must not be established. Otherwise, it will definitely cause a lot of trouble. Now Debachin only wants to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly. We have to let them understand that establishing a guild is never a simple matter. His strength alone is far from enough. A trace of coldness flashed in the eyes of Yin Yi, the president of the Fire Attribute Guild. Young people nowadays are so lawless just because they have some ability. They want to challenge the rules set by everyone. It's simply wishful thinking. Everyone nodded, thinking back to when they heard about the reputation Debachin and Bailey Hongzhuang had made for themselves. They admired them very much. After all, to have such strength in the younger generation was enough to prove their talent and potential. However, after this incident, their views had completely changed. The saying newborn calves are not afraid of tigers was exactly what Debachin was saying. The more Luo Qinghao, Yin Yi, and Feng Yuxian spoke, the more they felt that it was reasonable. They were filled with righteous indignation and wished that they could destroy the Dark Sacred Assembly right now. I hope that our absence today can teach them a lesson and let them understand our attitude. Luo Qinghao's face was ashen, and he couldn't hide his anger. If they had given up on this idea after knowing our attitude, then things wouldn't have developed to this extent. In his opinion, Debachin and Bailey Hongzhuang were both God's favored children. As long as they did not take the wrong path, their future achievements would not be bad. Why did he have to do such a thing to challenge authority? He only felt that this was the fearless personality of young people. As long as they suffered, they would understand that some things simply could not be challenged. Hearing Luo Qinghao's words, everyone nodded. In fact, the Di family and the Lin family were getting stronger and stronger. If possible, they didn't want to be enemies with these two forces. However, it all depended on Debachin's attitude. If Debachin insisted, then they had no other choice. Chapter 60-90. He was a little hesitant. When he first heard about the Dark Sacred Assembly, it was indeed shocking. But after thinking about it carefully, so many years had passed, and those who should rise would eventually rise. No one knew whether their actions were right or wrong. As Song Longtian's voice fell, everyone turned their eyes and looked at Song Langtian in surprise, as if they couldn't believe that he would say such a thing at this time. Song Langtian, what do you mean by this? Do you still want to support the establishment of the Dark Society? Luo Qinghao looked at Song Langtian in disbelief and asked in a questioning tone. Have you forgotten the lesson from back then? I'm sure you're well aware of how terrifying the methods of dark attribute cultivators are. That's not what I mean. Song Langtian frowned. I'm just talking about another possibility. In fact, we all understand that it has been hundreds of years since that incident, and the dark attribute cultivators have been suppressed for so many years. I believe that there are also dark attribute cultivators around you. But are they really so heinous? If we don't speculate on Debachin's malicious intentions, maybe they are just doing this to give the dark attribute cultivators a space to develop freely. They just hope that everyone can treat them fairly and justly. They don't want to do anything harmful to the existence of the world. Before coming into contact with Bailey Hongzhuang, his thoughts might be the same as Luo Qinghao and others. But after seeing how hardworking Bailey Hongzhuang was, he felt that these young people might not be as complicated as they thought. Perhaps their original intentions were the simplest and purest. Lu Hongwei was a little surprised that Song Langtian would say such a thing. But in fact, after chatting with Bailey Hongzhuang at that time, he had also thought about this issue carefully. Although he didn't admit it, he knew very well in his heart that in some respect, he agreed with Bailey Hongzhuang's point of view. It was just that in his current position, he couldn't say all this clearly. Now that Song Langtian took the initiative to mention this point, he also wanted to take this opportunity to say a few words for Bailey Hongzhuang. Guild leader Song is right. Do you remember Huang Futing from the Huangfu family in this day and age? Back then, he was also a peerless talent. However, ever since that incident, he had long since disappeared without a trace. These young people didn't do anything wrong, but they had to pay such a high price. After hearing the words of Song Langtian and Lu Hongwei, Luo Yinghao and the others couldn't help but stand up, looking extremely complicated. So, President, what do you mean by that? Luo Qinghao asked. Feng Yuxian looked serious as well. Are you planning to support the establishment of the Dark Society? Her voice was extremely loud. Perhaps because she was too shocked, the sound of the rain became sharp as she spoke. This was a situation that they had never imagined. In their minds, President Lu would be the first to object. But now President Lu actually said the opposite. This was simply inconceivable to them. Sensing the incredulous gazes of the crowd, Lu Hongwei faintly sighed. He had not thought of how to deal with this matter. Chapter 6091. That's not what I meant. I just think we can look at this matter from another perspective. Lu Hongwei said slowly. President, there's no need to say more about this matter. Yin Ye's face turned cold. In fact, we have no room to change this matter at all. We need to give everyone an explanation. For so many years, the situation of the 6 major guilds and the Great Sacred Assembly has never changed. Everyone is used to the existence of the Dark Sacred Assembly, and everyone rejects dark attribute cultivators. If we agree to this matter, then how should we face the others? Even if we can face the others, we have no way to face the past presidents. Yes, President, I understand that you said this because Bailey Hongzhuang is the Holy Maiden of Light. You don't want this matter to involve her, so you said such words. But you are also the president of the Sacred Assembly. I hope you can make an objective decision on this matter. Feng Yuxian frowned. She had always admired President Lu, but she never thought that President Lu would also be muddle-headed on this matter. In order to be biased towards Bailey Hongzhuang, he even said such words. Luo Qinghao looked at Song Langtian with a livid expression. If you still insist on your attitude and agree to the establishment of the Dark Society, then the conflict between us will be inevitable. Although there had always been contact between the guilds, there was also competition. The presidents of the major guilds had always been competing with each other, and no one was willing to give in. They believed that the entire Wood Attribute Guild would be dissatisfied with Song Langtian's decision. At that time, Song Langtian might not even be able to keep his position as the president. Looking at Luo Qinghao's serious look, Song Langtian understood the other party's thoughts and immediately said, My original intention is actually the same as President Lu's. Luo Qinghao, don't misunderstand me too much. Facing such a situation, Song Langtian sighed inwardly. Even if he wanted to help Bailey Hongzhuang, he understood that there was no possibility at all based on the situation in front of him. At this moment, the president of the Thunder Attribute Guild, Lei Ming, who had been silent, suddenly said, Since everyone's thoughts are the same, then this matter is decided. If they can take this opportunity to repent and give up on this plan, then this matter will be over. But if they don't repent and continue, then we can only use force. Everyone be prepared. If the D family and the Lin family insist on protecting them, then we will have no choice but to take action. Seeing Thunder's serious expression, everyone fell silent. Although the Thunder Attribute Guild was only a guild, and not a sacred assembly, due to Thunder's strength, his words carried a lot of weight. Lu Hongwei had always been the leader of the 7 great guilds, but he didn't know what to say in this situation. Because he hadn't even thought through his own attitude. After confirming that none of the guild leaders would arrive, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen returned to their residence. Xiren and the others had always been very concerned about this matter. When they saw the 2 of them return, they immediately went to greet them. Beichen, what's the situation? Xiren had an anxious look on his face. He was about to go crazy from staying here today. Chapter 6092. Di Beichen's expression was solemn. He didn't hide anything in front of his friends. Today's matter indeed made him feel that the resistance to establishing the Dark Sacred Assembly was much greater than they had imagined. He originally wanted to take this opportunity to persuade everyone, so that things wouldn't be so serious. However, the other party's attitude was very firm. They didn't even have the chance to persuade them. Looking at Di Baichen's solemn expression, Shangguan Ying, and when Ziren understood that this matter wasn't so optimistic. Hong Zhuang, what's going on? Can you tell us quickly? Shangguan Ying turned her attention to Bailey Hong Zhuang. Her delicate face couldn't hide her worry. As friends, they really wanted to help. However, in the face of such a big matter, they clearly understood that their strength was too small. Bailey Hong Zhuang didn't hide anything. We waited for a day but no one came. As soon as she said this, Shangguan Ying and Wen Ziren were stunned at first. They only felt that the situation wasn't as complicated as they thought. However, after thinking about it carefully, they felt that the situation seemed to be even worse. So this shows their attitude? Shangguan Ying asked tentatively. Bailey Hong Zhuang nodded slightly. That's right. I'm afraid it's impossible to persuade them. Then what should we do now? When Ziren scratched his head, he only felt that the situation was far more troublesome than they had imagined. In this way, it seemed that they couldn't find any direction at all. At this time, Di Baichen suddenly said, "Let's establish it directly in 3 days." His magnetic voice had a charming charm. It was as pleasant as the sound of nature. However, when everyone heard the content clearly, they couldn't help but be stunned. Their eyes were full of astonishment. Baichen, you mean to announce the establishment directly? When Ziren was stunned, Di Baichen nodded. Now that the news has been announced, since it's imperative, why worry so much? We've already sent out invitations. It's fine if they don't want to come. They'll definitely come in 3 days. That's true, but Baichen, have you really thought this through? Ziren's usual joking expression was replaced with an extremely serious one. Baichen was his good brother. If something went wrong this time, they would not be able to bear the consequences. I've thought about it. Di Baichen smiled faintly, his expression unreadable. From the day I chose to establish it, I had already thought about all of this. Just because someone is against it doesn't mean that everyone is against it. I believe that there will still be people who will support it. There are so many dark attribute cultivators standing behind us. How can we bear to disappoint them? Bailey Hong Zhuang and the other two fell silent. Although it had only been a few days since the news had spread, the faces of all the dark attribute cultivators who had come were brimming with excitement. Especially after knowing the danger they would face, not a single one of them chose to back down. Even when Ziren, who was not a dark attribute cultivator, felt touched by their unity, let alone Di Baichen and Bailey Hong Zhuang. Baichen, since you've already decided as your brother, I'll definitely support you. When Ziren smiled, I'll go tell everyone to spread the news. Thank you for your hard work. You two must be tired today. Go back and have a good rest. Chapter 6093. Currently, Emperor Cloud City was already packed with people from various powers. Hence, the speed at which this news spread far exceeded everyone's expectations. Even if everyone already knew the news, when Di Baichen really released the news, everyone couldn't help but feel surprised. Di Baichen is really bold. He's announcing the establishment of the Dark Church in 3 days. The various large guilds haven't even expressed their stance yet. I think the reason why Di Baichen left these 3 days is to give the leaders of the major guilds some time to react, right? Actually, as long as the various large guilds' attitudes remain unchanged, it's all the same. The newly established Dark Sacred Assembly is no match for the 7 large guilds. These dark attribute cultivators are really bold. When the time comes, they'll definitely face a devastating blow. Sarcastic remarks were everywhere in Emperor Cloud City. Everyone was watching this matter with the mentality of watching a good show. The reason they had come here was to watch the development of this matter. As for taking action, they didn't need to do anything. The 7 large guilds would deal with this matter directly. This was because everyone understood that this order was maintained by the 7 large guilds. When such a thing happened, the 7 large guilds' attitude would be the most resolute. Xiao family, Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongqing sat together. The two of them didn't go to Emperor Cloud City, but they were well aware of the city's situation from the constant updates they received. This Di Baichen is really stubborn. He's announcing the establishment of the Dark Church. The Di family didn't stop him. Xiao Yanlong had a smug smile on his face, and he seemed extremely relaxed. Ever since the end of his training in the primordial battlefield, he hadn't felt so relaxed. The D family was like a mountain pressing down on his heart, making it impossible for him to feel at ease. Only, he hadn't expected that the heavens would give him such a good opportunity. With the 7 large guilds taking action, the D family and Lin family might not even need to worry about it. If they couldn't, then they'd have to clean up the mess. It wasn't easy for Di Yujue to find this son of his. I'm afraid that he only knows how to dote on him and agree to whatever he wants. However, he doesn't know that this will not only harm Di Beichen, but also implicate the entire family. Jun Hongqing chuckled. Indeed, success and failure were all due to the same cause. The Di family's reputation had soared because of Di Beichen, but it was also because of Di Beichen that they had fallen into such a situation. Let's wait patiently. There will be a good show in 3 days. The guild leaders of the major guilds were the most furious when they heard the news. They had thought that Di Beichen would be more tactful and give up on the idea of inviting him. However, they didn't. It was only the 2nd day, and Di Beichen had decided to establish it in 3 days. He didn't put them in his eyes at all. This is too much. Luo Qinghao couldn't hold back the anger in his heart after hearing the news. Since Di Beichen has made up his mind to do this, then we have no choice but to be impolite. Yan Yi nodded and said with a livid face, if he announces the establishment of the Dark Church in 3 days, then we'll wait until that day to go and make this impossible. Song Langtian sighed faintly. Di Beichen's temper was too unyielding. This approach was tantamount to intensifying the original conflict. Chapter 6094. The 3-day deadline arrived as promised. During this period of time, everything around the Dark Sacred Assembly had been completed. A huge square was located near the Dark Sacred Assembly. This was the place where the Dark Attribute members could listen to the president's speech. It was also the place where the Dark Sacred Assembly was announced today. Early in the morning, the entire Emperor Cloud City seemed to have been awakened. It was extremely lively. Everyone couldn't hold back their curiosity and walked toward the dark square. They understood that there would be a good show today, the most lively show in the entire upper realm. All the major powers arrived one after another. The inns and restaurants in the entire Emperor Cloud City were already full. Many people could only spend the night outside the city. However, this didn't stop the enthusiasm of the crowd. If they missed such a lively occasion, it would be a lifelong regret. If Di Beichen came to Emperor Cloud City, he would find many familiar faces here. Almost all the powers he met during his daily training were here. Morong Jing and the others had been worried since they arrived, while Nangong Yuqing and the others were here to watch a good show. I really didn't expect this news to be true. Morong Jing couldn't help but sigh. Even now that he had arrived in Emperor Cloud City, he still felt unreal. It hadn't been long since the training in the ancient battlefield. He had never heard Di Beichen mention this matter before. He didn't expect it to be true all of a sudden. For them, there were no signs at all. They couldn't help worrying, but it seemed like there was nothing they could do to help. Beichen is really a godlike man. Jiang Wenyan sighed with emotion. I was still in seclusion. As soon as I heard the news, I hurried over. It's fine if he doesn't make a sound, but when he does, he amazes everyone. Chen Feng sighed with emotion. He had seen a lot of geniuses in the past, but only Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang were able to shock him like this. Jiang Wenyan shook his head. I feel that they are usually quite amazing. Now it's not just amazing, it's terrifying. Not to mention the younger generation, even their parents wouldn't have the courage to do something like this. However, Di Beichen had done it. Thinking about it carefully, he was probably the only person in the entire upper realm capable of doing something like this. Morong Jing Jiang Wenyan, this is great. Di Beichen is going to do something so heinous. Are you still planning to support him? Nangong Yuqing couldn't help but interrupt Morong Jing and the others who were talking. Normally Di Beichen and the others were like brothers. Now that such a big thing had happened, this so-called alliance. Hearing this voice, Morong Jing and the others couldn't help but turn around. Seeing Nangong Yuqing's smug expression, their faces sank. This guy had been taught a lesson by Bei Chun for so long, yet he was still jumping around. Nangong Yuqing, don't say I didn't warn you. You've been suppressed by Bei Chun for so long. Previously, Bei Chun was focused on Jun Lingxuan and couldn't be bothered to make a move against you. Now that Jun Lingxuan is gone, if you continue to be so happy, I'm afraid you'll have a tragic end. Chapter 6095. Nangong Yuqing clearly hadn't expected Jiang Wenyan to say such words to him. He blanked for a moment before his face turned ashen. His voice was heavy and filled with unwillingness as he glared at Jiang Wenyan. I didn't expect that you would still refuse to give up at this time. The major guilds won't let Di Beichen off. At that time, let alone Di Beichen, even the Di family and the Lin family will suffer a huge blow. It's impossible for Di Beichen to deal with me. Jiang Wenyan's expression sank. Even if he didn't like Di Beichen, he couldn't help but worry about Di Beichen's current situation. At this time, Morong Jing said, Nangong Yuqing, didn't you always think that Beichen wasn't your opponent? What happened in the end? Don't be too confident. Otherwise, the one who will end up as a joke will be you, Chen Feng added lazily. You. Nangong Yuqing pointed at the three people in front of him. These three were echoing each other, making it impossible for him to win. You will regret this. Hee. The three of them sneered but no longer paid any attention to him. This Nangong Yuqing used to be an outstanding person. However, for some unknown reason, he has become more and more despicable in the past 2 years. Maybe he's depressed from being bullied by Bei Chen. When Nangong Yuqing turned around to leave, he heard Chen Feng and Jiang Wenyan's discussion, and immediately staggered. You're the one who's depressed from being bullied. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen sat quietly in the headquarters of the Dark Sacred Assembly, looking at the changes in the sky. Soon the appointed time would arrive. Bai Lian Che Linger and the others were beside them. Everyone was clearly gathered together, but none of them spoke. The atmosphere was so heavy that it seemed as if even the air had frozen. Young Master D. Miss Bailey, long time no see. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. Bailey Hongzhuang turned around and saw a familiar figure that she hadn't seen for a long time. Ouyang Jifeng. Young Master Ouyang? Bailey Hongzhuang stood up, her face as elegant as a lotus flower rising out of the water, slightly surprised. Back then, he met Ouyang Jifeng at the alchemy competition, but it was said that later on, he put most of his energy into alchemy, so the number of times they met was not many. However, today's matter was so sensational that it wasn't strange for him to appear here. The only thing they didn't expect was that he would actually come looking for them. Are you surprised to see me? Ouyang Jifeng smiled faintly. Di Beichen spread out his hands. His devilish face was very calm, and no one could tell what he was thinking. Please sit. Ouyang Jifeng took the opportunity to sit down and said, Actually, I didn't come here for any other reason. I just admire your courage. When I first heard the news, I was very shocked. I couldn't connect you to this matter at all. Now it seems that your courage is really something ordinary people don't have. Young Master Ouyang, you flatter us. Actually, we are also worried now. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Even if she didn't have much contact with Ouyang Jifeng, she also understood that this person wasn't a person with complicated thoughts. There was no need to be too afraid. To be honest, my big brother is also of the dark attribute. All these years, because of his attribute, he rarely appeared in the eyes of the world. He is also a genius, but because of this matter, his future was ruined in vain. Chapter 6096. Ouyang Jifeng had a warm smile on his face, but his eyes were very serious. Bailey Hongzhuang could even see the sadness in his eyes. She never knew that Ouyang Jifeng had such an elder brother. But after thinking about Huang Futing's situation, she could understand. With Huang Futing's position in the family, he still chose to leave. It was not strange that Ouyang Jifeng had such an elder brother. In fact, they believed that every force had dark attribute cultivators, but they had always lived in the dark, and no one had ever noticed. Thank you. Chen's lips slowly raised into a smile. At this time, even a word of support was rare and precious. Because of this matter, many forces that wanted to be on good terms with the family took the opportunity to retreat, as if everything before was illusory. It was because of this that support at this time was even more precious. Ouyang Jifeng felt the change in Chen's attitude. His smile became brighter, and his eyes were firm. I will do my best for this matter. As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were all stunned, and some even doubted what they had heard. I am the young master of the Ouyang family. I can represent the Ouyang family. Ouyang Jifeng's voice rang out once again, making everyone understand that he was serious about what he said. Chen stared at Ouyang Jifeng. His sharp eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. After a while, he smiled and slowly stretched out his right hand. Welcome, ally. Thank you. Ouyang Jifeng shook Chen's hand. Both of them used a lot of strength. When they shook hands, their bones protruded slightly, showing their persistence and faith. When they sat down again, everyone's attitude towards Ouyang Jifeng had changed. They were more intimate. Actually, the current situation is very worrying. I heard some news. A few days ago, the leaders of the 7 major guilds had gathered in the Holy Light Assembly. They must be discussing this matter. Although there hasn't been any movement in the past 2 days, I can be sure that they will appear today, Ouyang Jifeng said in a deep voice. This is also within my expectations. Chen's expression was calm. The reason why he directly announced it was because of this. Since they would come sooner or later, they might as well appear together. If they could survive today, they would get better and better in the future. If they couldn't, he would never let such a thing happen. The 7 major guilds will never agree to this. After the incident, the upper realm set a rule. Only the 7 major guilds will not allow the rise of the dark attribute. When my elder brother decided on the dark attribute, we were not convinced and wanted to take the opportunity to change. But later, reality told us that it was too difficult. Perhaps we didn't have such courage back then, but you did. You've done too many things beyond my imagination. What do you think they will do? Chen raised his eyebrows. Ouyang Jifeng muttered. I think they will appear directly and stop the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Your direct announcement has angered them. If we guessed wrong, they will definitely bring people here today to destroy the headquarters of the Dark Sacred Assembly and interrupt its establishment. Once you resist, your entire family will be implicated. Chapter 6097. So, the most important thing is still strength, Chen said slowly. This matter could be said to be simple, but it could also be said to be difficult. As long as they were strong enough to suppress the leaders of the 7 major guilds, then all these difficulties would be nothing. This was because this was a world controlled by the strong. Your family should have many strong people, right? Ouyang Jifeng looked at Chen seriously. As far as I know, the strongest among the 7 major guilds are President Lu and President Lei of the Thunder Attribute Guild. As long as we can suppress them, then this matter will be much easier to resolve. Chen's eyes were as dark as the night. He had also discussed this matter with his father, and their thoughts were almost the same. The strength of the guild leaders could never be underestimated. When they joined forces, their strength would be extremely terrifying. Young master, it's time, Huang Futing reminded as he looked at the sky outside. Chen nodded slightly, then slowly walked out of the Dark Sacred Assembly's door and walked toward the square behind. At this moment, the square was already surrounded by people. Almost all the people who were rarely seen on normal days had appeared here. This scene could not even be compared to the Light Saint's succession ceremony. When that noble and oppressive figure appeared, everyone's eyes fell on him. He was a man full of magic. Wherever he appeared, everyone's eyes would involuntarily be attracted to him. And today he was the main character. He wore a black robe with red burning flames embroidered on the tail of the robe. A fiery red flame belt was tied around his waist, making his tall figure seem even more outstanding. His face had always been extremely good-looking. The entire upper realm knew that Chen was famous for being a handsome man. When they saw him today, everyone could not help but be captivated by his handsome face. It was a shockingly handsome face. His facial features seemed to be carved by the heavens. The contours of his face were as sharp as a knife, cold and hard but not lacking in handsomeness. A pair of eyes containing a mysterious light restrained this fierce and frightening light. With just a glance, people could not help but lower their heads, not daring to look at those eyes containing powerful strength. Under the gazes of countless people, he quietly appeared on the high platform, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. Looking at that proud figure, the people who originally wanted to ridicule him inexplicably felt their lips dry up. They could not say what they wanted to say. This aura had already surpassed them by too much. Ridicule? What right did they have to ridicule someone who was more outstanding than them in many aspects? Di Yujue and the others looked at Di Bei Chun on the high platform, and their hearts were filled with pride. Having such a son was really something to be proud of. Even if what happened next was beyond their expectations, they were prepared to deal with it. Bailey Hongzhuang stood below the stage, looking at the man on the stage, her clear eyes overflowing with satisfaction and worship. She admired this man. She admired his courage, his wisdom, and everything about him. She was even more grateful because this was her man. Shangguan Yingying stood beside Bailey Hongzhuang and whispered, "Hongzhuang, look, the Xiao family and the Jun family are there." Chapter 6098. Xiao Soa didn't come. Bailey Hongzhuang quietly retracted her gaze. Shangguan Yingying nodded her head. Looks like the news we heard is correct. Xiao Soa was really pregnant. She must be nursing the fetus at home, and doesn't want everyone to know about this. Otherwise, how could she not appear at such a lively time? As expected, on the high platform, Di Beichen looked at the dense crowd below, and said with a calm expression, "Thank you everyone for coming here to witness the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly." Just one sentence ignited the hearts of everyone below the stage. Behind me are all darkness-type cultivators. Di Beichen pointed his finger to the back of the high platform. Behind them was also a dense crowd of people. However, everyone was wearing the Dark Guild's uniform, and could be recognized at a glance. When so many people gathered together, the scene was extremely spectacular. Huang Futing and the rest stood in the crowd, wearing clothes that showed their identity. Everyone's heart was filled with pride. At least today, they didn't have to hide and worry about being discriminated against because of their attribute. Today, they could openly stand here and tell everyone that they were darkness attribute cultivators, and that they were fearless. Because of the calamity back then, the darkness attribute had been silent for too many years. Every darkness attribute cultivator was implicated. All these years, they were like rats on the street, and lived very miserably. But, Di Beichen emphasized his tone. What happened back then had nothing to do with anyone behind me. Because of what happened in the past, they suffered for so many years. This kind of life that couldn't see the light of day is not something that everyone here can understand. Since there are 8 attributes in the world, then there shouldn't be only 7 major guilds, but 8 major guilds. Therefore, today, I announce that the Dark Sacred Assembly is officially established. Following Di Beichen's words, the darkness attribute cultivators cheered one after another. The heaven-shaking cheers stunned everyone present. This momentum was too shocking, far beyond their imagination. All along, no one had placed the darkness attribute cultivators in their eyes. In their eyes, these people were just a pile of loose sand and couldn't do anything. However, when this group of people gathered together, they realized that this was also a force that couldn't be underestimated. Most importantly, from these people's eyes, they could see the passion that they hadn't felt for a long time. They even noticed that these people's eyes were filled with fanatical worship when they looked at Di Beichen. That kind of worship was like the worship of believers toward the Lord. They believed from the bottom of their hearts. This kind of situation was the dream of almost every person in power. But everyone knew that it was almost impossible to achieve this. However, Di Beichen really did it. Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongqing couldn't help but look at each other. They seemed to have underestimated Di Beichen's preparations. Even they felt that this kind of trust was terrifying. These believers were probably blind to Di Beichen. That kind of fanaticism made it seem that no matter what Di Beichen asked them to do, they would be willing to do it, even if it meant giving up their lives. Chapter 60-99. I didn't notice Di Beichen's preparations in this regard before. I didn't expect him to be able to do it to this extent. Xiao Yanlong's heart was filled with shock. This Di Beichen made him feel very scared. Just the increase in his cultivation in the past 2 years was already very shocking. How could he have the time to not set up such a big trap at this time? Even if they put all their effort into it, it would not be easy to do it. But Di Beichen had done it. Now he could only hope that the Dark Sacred Assembly would not be established successfully. Otherwise, once it succeeded, the Dark Sacred Assembly would completely become the Di family's backing. Even if it was in the name of the Sacred Assembly, because of Di Beichen's existence, the two had almost merged into one. In addition to Bailey Hongzhuang's weight in the Light Sacred Assembly, with the support of the Dark Sacred Assembly and the Light Sacred Assembly, the Di family might directly become the #1 family in the upper realm. In the past, he would only think about this in his dreams. It was too difficult to achieve this, but unknowingly, the Di family had fulfilled all of this. As long as the Dark Sacred Assembly was successfully established today, then all of this would only be a matter of time. Once this child grows up, he will be very terrifying. Jun Hongqing's face was gloomy. Looking at the stunning figure on the high platform, his mood was extremely complicated. Previously, he had never understood how his son could not compare to Di Beichen. Why was it that every time he went out to train, he would be defeated by Di Beichen? This time he understood. The two of them looked at each other, countless thoughts flashing through their minds. Thinking about all the things that had happened over the years, they felt even more depressed and regretful. Don't worry, he won't succeed. After a long while, Jun Hongqing suddenly said. Xiao Yanlong nodded slightly. The possibility of this kind of thing succeeding was too low. Di Beichen indeed could not succeed. But for some reason, if the person standing on the high platform was someone else, they would be almost certain of the result. However, at this moment, the one standing on the high platform was Di Beichen. Their hearts were inexplicably uncertain. From now on, the upper realm will have one more elemental guild, the Dark Sanctum. This is the home of all darkness attribute cultivators. Here, everyone can also obtain the darkness attribute cultivation method. Di Beichen smiled confidently. He believed in everyone's talent and strength. Even if the current darkness attribute cultivators were much weaker than the other guilds, Shifeng was confident that many outstanding darkness attribute cultivators would emerge in time. Dark Sacred Assembly! Dark Sacred Assembly! All the cultivators of the Sacred Assembly shouted in unison. Their faces were filled with passion, and their hearts were filled with excitement. Some people couldn't help but shed tears. They had been fighting alone for so many years, and now they had finally found an organization. From now on, even if the situation was difficult, at least everyone would be together. Moreover, they all believed that under the leadership of their guild master, they would definitely get better and better. Di Beichen's face was overflowing with a confident smile. His handsome and peerless face became even more elegant. He was like a god, exuding a noble and arrogant aura. Everyone's eyes could not help but be attracted. It was obviously an extremely young face, but it revealed a power that looked down on the world, making people not dare to look at him directly. Chapter 60-100. It took a lot of courage to face those soul-stirring eyes. Everyone stared at this scene in a daze. Clearly, many people wanted to stop the Dark Sacred Assembly before it was announced, but for some reason, none of them took action until now. Looking at Di Beichen, who was speaking frankly on the high platform, Xiao Yanlong couldn't help but feel anxious. Why hasn't the 7 Sacred Assemblies guild leaders appeared yet? If they still didn't appear, then the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly would be regarded as a tacit agreement, and it would be even more difficult to stop it in the future. Don't worry, they're here. A smile appeared on Junhong Cheng's face. His originally anxious face suddenly relaxed, and unconcealable joy appeared on his face. Xiao Yanlong was slightly stunned, and after sensing the tyrannical auras, he quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Dark Sacred Assembly? We disagree. Just as Di Beichen was speaking frankly and confidently, introducing the Dark Sacred Assembly's purpose to everyone, a cold and dignified voice suddenly resounded, exploding on the high platform like thunder, clearly entering the ears of everyone present. Following the appearance of this voice, the entire plaza seemed to freeze for a moment. Everyone's mind trembled. Immediately after, they noticed that 7 figures had suddenly appeared on the high platform. Facing these figures, everyone didn't find them unfamiliar, because they were none other than the guild leaders of the 7 great guilds. Luo Qinghao stared coldly at Di Beichen and spoke again. We disagree with the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Hongzhuang. Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang, her eyes filled with urgency. Bailey Hongzhuang's body tensed up when the guild leaders of the 7 great guilds appeared. Even though she had long since expected such a situation, she couldn't help but feel nervous when it truly happened. Let's watch first. Bailey Hongzhuang suppressed the complicated thoughts in her heart and calmed down. Di Yujue, Lin Wenlan, and the others also tensed up, their eyes fixed on the high platform. As long as the situation on the high platform was slightly off, they would definitely take action immediately. No matter what, they couldn't let anything happen to Beichen. Di Beichen was neither servile nor overbearing, as he faced the 7 people from the upper realm, who were of extremely high status. The corners of his lips even curled up slightly. He raised his eyebrows slightly, but his eyes, which were as deep as a lake, were unfathomable. What do the presidents think? Luo Qinghao slowly narrowed his eyes as he looked at Di Beichen's unmoved appearance. This was not the first time he had seen Di Beichen. He had seen Di Beichen at the succession ceremony of the Holy Maiden of Light. Although this young man was the young master of the Di family, he felt that if this young man did not have this identity, he would not be worthy of the Saint of Light. However, now that he was really looking at Di Beichen, he realized that he was also a young man who could not be underestimated. At the very least, his mental fortitude was incomparable to that of an ordinary person. It's impossible for the Dark Sacred Assembly to be established. Feng Yoshin's face was ashen. Her indifferent face was alienated, but her cold voice was filled with an undeniable meaning. As the guild leader of the water faction, Feng Yuxian was extremely strong and had a noble status. However, she had never liked anyone. She was already famous for being as cold as ice. At this moment, her words were filled with a coldness that pushed people thousands of miles away. Chapter 6101. Why? Di Beichen spoke unhurriedly. His devilishly handsome face did not show any anger, because of the 7 presidents' plans. On the contrary, it was as calm as a spring breeze. His calm appearance made it seem as if he was discussing the weather today, and gently asking for everyone's opinion. Such a reaction was clearly beyond the expectations of Feng Yuxian and the others. Compared to their aggressive attitude, Di Beichen's attitude made them speechless. It was as if you went to kill someone, but the person poured you a cup of tea and enthusiastically asked you what you were doing here today. Could you say it out loud? What do you mean why? Luo Qinghao's expression was somewhat unnatural. This Di Beichen really did not play by the rules. It made him feel like he had used the wrong strength and was very uncomfortable. In short, it's not allowed to be established. A few days ago, I wanted to invite several presidents to discuss this matter, but it seemed that you were not willing to give me any pointers. Since you are here today, I also want to know why there are only 7 major guilds, even though there are 8 attributes. Why can't dark attribute cultivators have their own guilds? What did we do wrong to deserve such a punishment? The magnetic voice was filled with warmth and gentleness. It was clearly a question, but because the voice was so pleasant to the ears, no one felt that it was aggressive. On the contrary, this question after question made everyone unable to help but think about the answer. Feng Yuxian, and the others did not expect such a situation to occur. These questions made it difficult for them to answer. Dark attribute cultivators are too dangerous. The catastrophe back then almost destroyed the entire upper realm. So from then on, the upper realm stopped the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Lu Hongwei's voice rang out. His wise eyes looked straight at Di Beichen. He had always known that the latter was a smart child. Today's reaction was indeed eye-catching. It did not cause the conflict to erupt immediately. Instead, it eased it a little. However, no matter what, today's result could not be changed. That kind of thing happened back, then only proved that some dark attribute cultivators had bad intentions. It does not mean that everyone is like that. Presidents, look at the young people behind me. They are all dark attribute cultivators. All these years, they have endured things that they did not need to endure at all. They have always struggled to survive under everyone's supercilious eyes and ridicule. Some were clearly favored by the heavens, but they were forced to leave their families because of such gazes. Some had happy families, but they left heartbroken because they did not want to implicate their families. Those who were able to appear here were already lucky, because many dark attribute cultivators lost their lives because of discrimination and oppression, or chose to commit suicide because they could not bear such gazes. Why are they being punished for something that happened hundreds of years ago? Don't tell me. They don't even have the chance to raise their heads as human beings? They can't even find a place to rest under the sun? It was as if he was lamenting the unfairness of the world. As if he was lamenting the unfairness of the world, of course, of the deceased. They were never unpardonable evildoers. They just wanted to work hard to live. Chapter 6102. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen and couldn't help but clench her hands. Her heart was also touched by this, and she felt an indescribable heartache. These days, because more and more darkness attribute cultivators had gathered here, they began to understand their situation more and more. It was because they understood that they felt even more heartache. Compared to them, the people who followed Huang Futing were already living a good life. Because they lived in groups, even if someone wanted to bully them, they would have to think twice. Some cultivators who were left alone lived like a joke. That kind of miserable situation was not something you could imagine. This situation made them even more determined. They had to do everything they could to change everything. Not only for He Xinjuan's last wish, but also to follow their hearts. This was something they wanted to do from the bottom of their hearts. Di Beichen's words were the thoughts of all the darkness attribute cultivators. The painful experiences of these years flashed through their minds. That kind of pain was not something that people of the other attributes could understand. They had suffered too many years of discrimination. They would be woken up in the middle of the night. Many people had never had a good night's sleep. The feeling of waking up in the middle of the night covered in cold sweat was really uncomfortable. Di Yujue's eyes shined brightly. This kind of Di Beichen was a rare treasure in their eyes. Perhaps in the eyes of others, doing such a thing was simply a thankless task. But this kind of pure heart was extremely precious to them. They were proud of Di Beichen. Ouyang Jifeng's hands couldn't help but tremble. If everyone saw this scene, they would be very happy. As the younger brother, he would do his best to facilitate this, so that his big brother would not fall into darkness forever. Almost everyone who disagreed with this matter felt as if a huge stone had been placed on their hearts after hearing this. Emotions were contagious, especially when Di Beichen's words were so exaggerated. Thinking of the situation of the darkness attribute cultivators in these years, everyone felt very miserable. Thinking about it carefully, this was just the result of the situation. It had nothing to do with these young people. Actually, I really agree with Beichen's approach. These people really don't have it easy. It's time to change this situation. Jiang Wenyan's expression was solemn. He had never expressed his stance, but in reality, his heart was already on the Dark Sacred Assembly's side. Many things continued not because they were right, but because no one could break the deadlock. As long as someone could break this stalemate, then there was still a chance for everything to turn around. These 2 days, I've been listening to them talk about their situation. It's really sad. Morongjing nodded. In the past, he had never paid much attention to these things. It was only after carefully understanding the situation that he realized how sad it was. The guild leader, who had originally intended to reject Di Baichen, hesitated for a moment. Everything Di Baichen said was reasonable, and they had no way to refute him. It was not that they were unaware of such a situation, but for the sake of the stability of the upper realm, they could only sacrifice a portion of their benefits. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, those without strength could only be slaughtered. Chapter 6103. Feng Yuxian and the others heaved a sigh of relief when they heard Lei Ming's words. Their initial panic also dissipated at this moment. Not establishing the Dark Sacred Assembly will only suppress their development to a certain extent, but it won't give them any hope of survival. Lei Ming's eyes were cold, and his cold face was devoid of any emotion. Compared to the catastrophe caused by dark attribute cultivators, such a choice should be made. Young man, you've just arrived in the upper realm not long ago. Newborn calves are not afraid of tigers, which is why you're fearlessly doing such a thing. Let me tell you, the matters of the upper realm are not as simple as you think. The rules that have been passed down for so many years naturally have their reasons. In short, we can't agree to the Dark Sacred Assembly. As long as we don't agree, it can't be established successfully. Lei Ming's cold voice ruthlessly pierced the hearts of every dark attribute cultivator present. For a moment, everyone looked at Lei Ming with resentment. However, Lei Ming did not care at all. No one is willing to be a sacrifice. I understand how you feel, but because of the danger of the dark attribute, this is the only way. No matter how unfair you think it is, this is a fact that cannot be changed. Just like how some people are born with disabilities, and some people are destined to be unable to cultivate, you are destined to be dark attribute cultivators. These things are essentially the same. Therefore, don't do such a meaningless thing to challenge authority. Instead of throwing your lives away like this, it's better to live like how you did before. His cold words were like ice, carrying a terrifying lethality. They pierced the hearts that had been reignited with hope until they were dripping with blood. These words were obviously extremely cruel, but they were somewhat reasonable, making it impossible for them to refute. They were indeed unwilling to become sacrifices, and were unwilling to receive such treatment because of their attributes. However, when they thought about those cultivators who were born with problems, they could not tell whose situation was worse. Below the high platform, Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongcheng both sighed in relief. Their tightly clenched fists gradually loosened. Di Baichen's words were too convincing. Even they were moved for a moment, especially when they sensed that the thoughts of everyone around them had changed. They were really worried that everyone would be moved by Di Baichen's words. They could not bear such an outcome at all. Fortunately, Lei Ming's attitude made them feel at ease. Why? This is too unfair to us. Below the high platform, some voices of dissatisfaction rang out. Some of them were even angry out of humiliation. They had been oppressed for so many years, and endured the supercilious looks that they did not deserve. Yet President Lei had actually said such cruel words. They could hear the arrogance in his words, and he was looking down on them. On what basis? What qualifications did the other party have to act superior in front of them? Why? Lei Ming laughed softly, but his eyes became increasingly sharp. Because I am stronger than all of you. With just one sentence, the entire square fell silent. Di Baichen's eyes grew increasingly deep. This was his first time meeting President Lei, but he never expected this person's attitude to be so arrogant and conceited. However, he also understood that Thunder had the right to be arrogant, because he was one of the strongest among the leaders of the 7 major guilds. Chapter 6104. President Lei, your strength is indeed stronger than the cultivators behind me. Di Baichen slowly raised his head, his piercing eyes looking straight at Lei Ming. His pair of dazzling eyes bloomed with a strong and proud brilliance. However, this doesn't mean that your talent is stronger than theirs, nor does it mean that they can't surpass you in the future. If you were also a dark attribute cultivator, I don't think you would have such strength in such a suppressed environment. The low and magnetic voice had a bewitching charm. Debachen's face was cold. The so-called guild president was really a cruel and inhumane guy. Lei Ming's eyes darkened, and his face was full of anger. He was just a junior, yet he dared to be so rude to him. Living on the verge of death. Why should we live on the verge of death? Don't you think it's ridiculous to speak in such a contemptuous tone, just because it didn't happen to you? Debachen's gaze was as sharp as a knife. If it didn't happen to him, he would never know how painful it was. His situation was much better than the other cultivators of the same attribute. But he also felt the strange gazes from the other cultivators. Because he was with Hong Zhuang, his dark attribute identity was mentioned more often. So he understood this feeling. Debachen, are you provoking me? Lei Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and his face was terrifyingly cold. Do you think you're really the president just because you announced the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly here? Do you really have the qualifications to talk to me like this? Hearing the cold threat contained in those words, Debachen was not afraid at all. I'm just refuting normally. Could it be that President Lei has been in a high position for a long time, so others can't even say the slightest objection? Lei Ming's face was livid, and the yuan qi in his body gradually surged. This junior who didn't know how to appreciate favors had successfully angered him. Seeing that Lei Ming was about to make a move, Song Langtian suddenly said, President Lei, Debachen is just a junior, why bother with him? It's ungentlemanly. Hearing this, Lei Ming restrained the surging yuan qi, glanced at Song Langtian thoughtfully, and then turned his gaze away with a cold snort. Luo Qinghao saw this and said, Don't say more at this time, Debachen, I'll give you 2 choices. 1. Immediately announce the dissolution of the guild now, and swear never to think about establishing the Dark Sacred Assembly again. I object. Without waiting for Luo Qinghao to finish speaking, Debachen's cold and resolute voice had already sounded. Luo Qinghao's face. If the presidents of the 7 major guilds also had a soft spot in their hearts, then this matter might be properly resolved by persuading them with reason and moving them with emotion. But obviously these people were not. They dictated everything and stipulated that everything could only go in the direction they dictated. These selfish guys only cared about their own interests. Chapter 6105. Faced with Debachen's resolute attitude, Luo Qinghao's words were stuck in his throat. He did not even have the chance to speak. As the guild leader, no one had ever dared to interrupt him like this. Most importantly, Debachen did not give him any face. You're saying we're selfish? Luo Qinghao raised his voice, and his gaze became cold and fierce. Our 7 major guilds have always been working hard to improve the strength of the upper realms cultivators. We selflessly help everyone improve their attribute power. You're saying we're selfish? Debachen's expression did not change. The reason you're worried about the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly is that you think the dark power is too terrifying. Once it grows, you won't be able to control many variables. That's why you're using this as a pretense to suppress it, right? I don't think bad people only appear in the dark attribute. Are all the cultivators of the other attributes good? Such words. I don't think you can say it, right? His deep and magnetic voice had a mocking tone. Now, it seemed that these guys were just guarding their own benefits, and were unwilling to give up any benefits. However, why should they sacrifice everyone with the dark attribute for their benefits? If that's the case, what are you if not selfish? Luo Qinghao's face darkened. He did not expect Debachen to be so eloquent. His words pierced through everything mercilessly. Some things were not even noticed by them. However, when Debachen said this, he could feel that many people's thoughts had changed. We can't let this kid continue. This will be very disadvantageous for us, Yin Yi said in a low voice. The upper realm had always been good under the management of their 7 major guilds. No one had ever made any unfavorable remarks. As soon as this kid opened his mouth, he felt that something bad was going to happen. If he was allowed to continue, it would inevitably cause more trouble. Luo Qinghao nodded. His thoughts were the same as Yin Ye's. Feng Yuxian noticed this as well. She immediately said, "Why should we waste our breath on him? Since this kid refuses a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, we can only take action." The purpose of coming here today was very clear. It was to stop the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly. If words did not work, then they would use force. Destroy the headquarters of the Dark Sacred Assembly and stop the ritual from continuing. Following Feng Yuxian's words, the elemental energy in Lei Ming and the rest's bodies surged. They looked coldly at Di Beichen, and no longer had the politeness from before. The atmosphere was tense, and the battle was on the verge of breaking out. Below the high platform, the expressions of many people changed slightly. It seemed like they were about to take action soon. Even though the process was more complicated than they had imagined, the result was still the same. The elemental energy in Di Beichen's body instantly surged out. His body posture quietly changed, as if he was also prepared for battle. Seeing this, Lu Hongwei sighed faintly. In the end, this was still the result. However, this path was chosen by Di Beichen and the others. Since they had chosen the most difficult path, they should have been mentally prepared to face everything. After being contradicted by Di Beichen, Lei Ming was already unhappy. Now that the time had come, he said coldly, "Since you don't know what's good for you, I'll teach you a lesson." Chapter 6106. Lei Ming's speed was as fast as lightning. As the president of a lightning-type guild, his lightning-type powers were unparalleled. In the blink of an eye, Lei Ming's attack had landed on Di Beichen's position. However, to his surprise, his attack had only grazed the corner of Di Beichen's robes. Di Beichen had managed to dodge it in such a short amount of time. "I've underestimated you." Lei Ming raised an eyebrow with a hint of surprise between his brows. Based on his judgment, Di Beichen's cultivation was only at the heavenly moon stage. Based on Di Beichen's age, it was true that he was a genius who had reached such a level of cultivation. However, in front of Lei Ming, this level of power was clearly not enough. However, dodging is only luck, not true power. Di Beichen stared calmly at Lei Ming, completely ignoring the mockery in the latter's words. "You're so much older than me. If you're not more powerful than me, wouldn't that be a great embarrassment? I don't know about anything else, but I'm sure of one thing. If I were to reach your age, I would definitely be more powerful than you." His rose-colored lips were slightly raised, revealing a trace of wickedness and dominance. His pleasant voice rang out, not giving Lei Ming any face at all. "Kid, you're digging your own grave." Lei Ming's gaze turned sharp. Di Beichen had truly angered him. In the next moment, Lei Ming no longer cared about what the others thought and charged forward once again. If he did not kill this kid today, he would never be able to vent the anger in his heart. Below the high platform, Di Yujue and the others had been paying attention to every single change on the high platform. When they saw that Lei Ming had the intention to kill Di Beichen, Di Yujue stood up as well. Lei Ming noticed Di Yujue's actions below the high platform. When he looked at Di Beichen again, a trace of mockery appeared in his eyes. "What, does the Di family head want to fight?" The sudden voice attracted everyone's attention. Only then did they notice Di Yujue's actions. Obviously, Di Yujue would not sit idly by while his son was being hunted down. It wasn't just Di Yujue. Huang Futing and the other dark attribute cultivators couldn't hold themselves back any longer. If not for the fact that Di Beichen had told them not to make a move until he gave the order, they would have already charged forward. Di Yujue's gaze was fixed on Lei Ming's body. From his expressionless face, everyone could vaguely see some anger. In fact, if it were anyone else whose son was being targeted like this on the high platform, the father would not be able to remain calm. The next moment, Lei Ming continued, "Di Beichen, didn't you want to be the president? Could it be that you don't have the strength to be so delusional? Look carefully at all the presidents here. Then look at your own strength. Do you have the qualifications to be the president of a guild? Faced with Lei Ming's questioning, Di Beichen's expression froze. In fact, he also understood that there was a certain gap between his strength and the other presidents. In fact, he didn't have to be the president. However, the dark attribute cultivators had been suppressed for too many years. Everyone who had lost their cultivation methods generally had low cultivation levels, so there was no other way. Could it be that one can be the president if one is strong? Bailey Hongzhuang leaped and appeared beside Di Beichen. Her shimmering delicate face was raised high with strong confidence and arrogance. As far as I know, if one wants to be the president, other than strength, the most important thing is reputation. Chapter 6107. Huang Futing and the other darkness-attributed cultivators could no longer hold themselves back. When they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words, they all started shouting, "We support President Di. Only Di Beichen is fit to be the president of the Dark Sacred Assembly. President Di. President Di." Wave after wave of shouts rang out. None of the darkness-attributed cultivators had ever doubted this point. In their hearts, Di Beichen was the one and only candidate. Di Beichen was the savior who saved them from suffering. Now that the president of the Thunder-attributed guild was pressuring the person they worshipped, they could no longer stand it. I think this President Lei is the one with a false reputation. I'm afraid that many people in the Thunder-attributed guild have opinions about him, so he can only rely on his strength to intimidate. One look and you can tell that this guy is not the one that everyone wants. The darkness-attributed cultivators were not polite at all. Just based on what Lei Ming had said earlier, they already hated him to the core. Now that he dared to attack their president, everyone wanted nothing more than to rush up and chop him into pieces. However, they also understood that in terms of strength, they were not Lei Ming's match. If they rushed up rashly and distracted President Di, it would be even worse. Lei Ming's face was already gloomy. After hearing these words, his face was already as black as the bottom of a pot. Looking at the black figure in front of him, his eyes narrowed. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang was wearing the Dark Sacred Assembly's uniform today. Standing beside Di Beichen, they looked like a pair. The dignified Saintess of Light is actually wearing the Dark Sacred Assembly's uniform. You really don't put the Light Sacred Assembly in your eyes at all. Have you ever thought about the feelings of those darkness-attributed cultivators? Luo Qinghao and the rest frowned. When they first came, they put all their attention on Di Beichen. Now that they saw Bailey Hongzhuang, they realized how inappropriate this matter was. The Saintess of Light's attire is indeed too much. Feng Yoxian's expression turned cold. When she heard that the Saint of Light was going to marry Di Beichen, she was very against it. However, the two of them were already married a long time ago. It was impossible to change this matter even if they wanted to, so they acquiesced. They had never thought that their tacit agreement back then would lead to such a situation. If they had known earlier, they would have opposed it back then. Lu Hongwei's expression was complicated when he saw this. He had always understood how important Di Beichen was to Bailey Hongzhuang, and Bailey Hongzhuang's actions today had made it clear. However, this would indeed put the Holy Light Assembly in an awkward position. President Lu, your Saint of the Light has done such a thing. Are you not going to do anything about it? Yin Yi looked at Lu Hongwei. Lu Hongwei had not said anything since they arrived here today. This made Yin Yi feel very frustrated. Normally, the Holy Light Guild was the leader of the 7 great guilds. Regardless of the situation, Lu Hongwei was always the leader. However, because this matter was related to Bailey Hongzhuang, the situation changed. In my opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang's actions are completely looking down on the Holy Light Assembly. She doesn't deserve to be the Saintess of Light. Strip her of her identity as the Saintess of Light. She has completely forgotten her duties. Chapter 6108. The Saint of Light was not only the faith of the light attribute cultivators. She was also an existence that cultivators of other attributes revered. However, the Saint of Light had abandoned herself to such an extent that she had stubbornly insisted on being involved with the darkness attribute. She had even done such a thing for Baichen. At that moment, the crowd felt that their previous respect for Bailey Hongzhuang had been wasted. It was simply a waste of their love and respect. Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongcheng looked at each other. The corners of their lips could not help but curl into a smile. At the same time, they gestured for their own cultivators to raise wave after wave of voices. If Baichen were to fall from power today, Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely be implicated as well. Once Bailey Hongzhuang loses her status as the Saint of Light, Xiao Soa would have hope once again. This way, everything would return to square one. The D family would decline, and they would take the opportunity to rise. Faced with the crowd's curses, Baichen frowned slightly and reached out his hand to protect Bailey Hongzhuang behind him. Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly spoke up. I know that everyone is very dissatisfied with my status. To be honest, I have resigned from my position as the Saint of Light. This was her decision. Even if the president did not agree to it at the time, she did not want her actions to affect the president and the Holy Light Assembly. The crowd, who had been clamoring, was stunned when they heard this. The lively scene suddenly fell silent, and the atmosphere was exceptionally strange. The crowd looked at each other. Did they hear wrongly? Bailey Hongzhuang said that she had resigned from her position as the Saint of Light? She must be crazy. For the sake of Baichen, she would even give up her status? Yujua's hands trembled slightly. Lin Yinqing could not help but cover her mouth. Her eyes were vaguely moist. They were well aware of the relationship between Bailey Hongzhuang and Baichen. They were surprised when they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang supported Baichen unconditionally, but they never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would make such a sacrifice. How many people yearned for that position? However, she said it so calmly, as if it was a small matter not worth mentioning. For so many days, Bailey Hongzhuang had never mentioned it in front of them. Lin Yinqing suddenly felt a bit of heartache. This girl had really done too much for her son. Fortunately, she also understood that Baichen would definitely not let her down. Feng Yuxian and the others turned to look at Lu Hongwei. They had not heard Lu Hongwei mention this before. Lu Hongwei did not answer Feng Yuxian and the others' questions. In fact, he did not agree. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang chose to stand on Baichen's side, the Saint of Light was chosen by the Saint Crystal. Bailey Hongzhuang was destined to be the Saint of Light. Regardless of whether she resigned or not, she was the only Saint of Light. This wasn't a position that could be taken over by anyone if one of them left. The entire Holy Light Assembly had tried for so many years, but no one had been able to gain the recognition of the Saint Crystal. Only Bailey Hongzhuang could do it. He was unwilling to give up on Bailey Hongzhuang just like that. Just as Lu Hongwei was about to deny it, Baichen's voice suddenly rang out. She is not the Saint of Light, but the Saint of Darkness. Chapter 6109. Dark Saintess. This was a term that had never been heard before, yet it was incomparably clear in everyone's ears. Everyone's expression froze momentarily. It was as if time had been frozen, leaving only the two black silhouettes. What did this mean? Everyone was asking the same question in their hearts. Bailey Hongzhuang was the Dark Saintess? Was this a joke? However, Chun Feng and the rest of the young cultivators that had participated in the ancient battlefield couldn't help but exchange glances as a bold and crazy conjecture appeared in their minds. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was a dual attribute Dark Saintess? Not only did she possess an outstanding light attribute, but she was also a dark attribute cultivator? If that was truly the case, then the reality was too scary, right? Dark Saintess. Lei Ming frowned. What was this all about? Before coming here, he had clearly thought that everything would be settled easily. However, after coming here, everything seemed to be different. One complicated problem after another appeared without stop. Even he couldn't understand what was going on. Bailey Hongzhuang fixed her gaze on Di Beichen, as a bright and beautiful smile appeared on her face. That's right. I am the Dark Saintess. She was the Dark Saintess, while Beichen was the Dark Saintess. Only with this could they be a true couple. If it wasn't for the fact that she had to deal with Xiao Suo back then, she wouldn't have competed for the position of the Light Saintess. All this time, Beichen had been bearing the criticism of these people, causing her to feel extremely uncomfortable. Rather than that, it would be better for her to live as a dark attribute cultivator. That would be more free and easy. Di Yujue and the rest that understood the situation smiled. They had already guessed the plan of Di Beichen and Feng Yuxian. Bailey Hongzhuang, whether you are the Dark Saintess or not, this is not something that can be decided with words alone. Feng Yuxian frowned. If Bailey Hongzhuang had given up the position of the Light Saintess due to feelings, she could still somewhat understand. However, she was now claiming that she was the Dark Saintess for no reason at all. This was too childish. This kind of thing was not a child's play. Just saying it casually was enough. Lu Hongwei was also a little confused. In his eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang had always been a person who knew her limits. But now she suddenly said something like that. It was indeed a little strange. I am indeed the Saintess of Light. The corners of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up. In the next moment, under everyone's gaze, she slowly stretched out her right hand. A black light slowly appeared in her hand. It was like a dancing black flame, dancing with the wind and emitting a demonic aura. Everyone stared blankly at the black light. For a moment, they couldn't even come back to their senses. If I'm not mistaken, it seems to be of the dark attribute, right? Jiang Wenyan nudged Morong Jing with his elbow. Am I seeing things? You don't seem to be seeing things, Morong Jing said in a daze. Because I seem to have seen it too. What followed after the silence was an explosive heated discussion. That smear of black was like a spark that quickly set the prairie ablaze. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. They could not accept such a sudden occurrence that defied common sense. Heavens! What did I just see? Isn't Bailey Hongzhuang the Light Saintess? Why does she have the dark attribute? Chapter 6110. Looking at the shocked expressions of the people below the stage, Bailey Hongzhuang watched all this with a calm expression. She turned to look at Di Beichen, who also returned a gentle gaze. All along, they had never mentioned the problem of dual attributes in front of others. They originally wanted to use it as a trump card, but they did not expect it to be made public on such an occasion. However, they were also very satisfied with such an effect. How is this possible? Lu Hongwei was also dumbfounded, because he was also standing on the high platform. He could clearly feel that the dark power surging out of Bailey Hongzhuang was real, and not a magic trick. He knew very well how strong Bailey Hongzhuang's light attribute talent was. He also remembered the scene when she lit up the Holy Maiden crystal. However, the figure in front of him exuding a dark aura was also real. Aren't darkness and light opposite? Why is this happening now? Luo Qinghao could not help but rub his eyes and carefully look at the scene in front of him. This was too shocking. The Holy Maiden really has the dark attribute. The hesitant voice was full of uncertainty. Even if all this really appeared in front of them, they still felt that it was inconceivable. Lei Ming and the other presidents did not speak. From the stiff lines on their faces, one could understand their complicated feelings. Xiao Yanlong could not help but look at Di Yujue. After noticing Di Yujue's calm expression, he understood that Di Yujue had already known this. Was it because of this that he had the confidence to support Di Beichen to make such a move? President Lu, do you know what's going on? Song Langtian lowered his voice and asked. This kind of thing completely subverted their understanding. Lu Hongwei shook his head, his eyes full of thoughts. Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't told him this before, so he didn't know anything about it. As a president, he had read a lot of books and thought that he had a good understanding of the light attribute, but such a scene really made him unable to explain. Among all of them, the most excited were the dark attribute cultivators. This news was also an unexpected surprise for them. The Holy Maiden of Light also possessed the dark attribute. Their initial worries had completely disappeared. It turned out that the high and mighty Saint of the Light was actually the same as them. Presidents, you said that the reason why the darkness attribute is suppressed is because this attribute is too dark and gloomy. However, I used to be the Holy Maiden of the Light, and now I also possess the dark attribute. Is that why you still insist on this? Her ink-black phoenix eyes stared at Lu Hongwei and the others. She had never believed that attributes represented a person's character. There were also many good people among the dark attribute cultivators. Moreover, she possessed both light and dark attributes at the same time. It was obvious that all of this was fake. Silence. None of the 7 guild leaders could answer Bailey Hongzhuang's question. This news directly ruined their plan. If they couldn't explain this point, even if they used force to suppress everything, they would still be criticized in the future. This simply didn't make sense. Because you are the Saint of Light, the only person who has been acknowledged by the Saint Crystal in all these years. That is why you are an exception. After a long while, Lu Hongwei slowly spoke. Chapter 61:11. That's right, you might be an exception. Luo Qinghao nodded. The Saint of the Light who had only appeared after so many years must have something special about her. Previously, he had not understood why Bailey Hongzhuang had been chosen. Now he understood a little better. Perhaps this was the most special thing about her. When the crowd heard Lu Hongwei's explanation, they looked at Bailey Hongzhuang once again with a sense of reverence in their eyes. She was indeed the Saint of the Light, whom they had been searching for so long. It turns out that she has such a special thing about her. Xiao Yanlong's heart sank. He had thought that by removing Bailey Hongzhuang from her position, Xiao Soa would have a chance. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang had displayed her dual attributes, he realized that the crowd did not feel anything. On the contrary, there seemed to be a sense of admiration in their eyes. Indeed, it was hard not to gasp in amazement at the appearance of the first dual attribute cultivator in such a long time. Dual attributes meant that she possessed dual powers. Most importantly, these 2 powers were publicly acknowledged as the most powerful. Both of them had appeared in her body at the same time. If this was not a sign of extraordinary talent, then what was? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly when she heard this answer. She then turned towards Di Beichen. Beichen, it's time for you to perform. Di Beichen raised the corners of his lips and replied, Since that's the case, presidents, you'd better watch carefully. Hearing Di Beichen's words, the hearts of the 7 presidents quivered. Even though they did not know what Di Beichen was preparing next, they understood that it was not going to be anything good, just by listening to his words. At the next moment, Di Beichen's body suddenly released a dazzling white light. The light was filled with a mysterious and holy aura. It carried with it an incomparably pure and clear power, causing the initially nervous hearts of the crowd to calm down inexplicably. However, this scene once again shocked everyone. Because wasn't the power that was emitting that incomparable aura the power of light? Isn't Di Beichen of the darkness attribute? Why would the power of light appear on him? Oh my god, could it be that Di Beichen's situation is the same as Bailey Hongzhuang's? He also has dual attributes. If that's really the case, then it's too terrifying. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. What had happened today had given them too much shock. One after another, each more shocking than the last. A second ago, they hadn't calmed down, but the next second, they fell into an even greater shock. Most importantly, if Bailey Hongzhuang was an accident, then what was Di Beichen? The answers that the 7 guild leaders had given a second ago had already been dispelled in the next second. Even those who despised the darkness attribute began to understand that one's character and attribute had nothing to do with one's character. Otherwise, the situation with Di Beichen wouldn't have happened. Lin Yi clasped her hands together tightly. Her small face was full of unconcealed excitement. This is simply too cool. It seems that second cousin and second cousin-in-law are really a perfect match. Lin Qianqian also nodded. They are really a match made in heaven. Even this kind of thing can happen to them. I really can't find any other explanation other than fate. Not only Lin Yi and Lin Chanqian, but everyone present at the moment also understood. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.